Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Naruto is trained by Konan and Nagato? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the Hope Angelina for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. Toby was ready to rip those damned eyes out of Nagato's head, if only there was someone else able to use them. As it was, he had to control himself and pretend to accept what the fool was saying. "I would like to know what has caused this change in you," he said calmly. "I had thought you were invested in carrying out the plan we came up with." It was really his plan, he'd simply given Nagato the right information and ideas to lead him in the right direction. "Konan and I recently traveled to Konoha," the man said. "We wished to see what had happened to them after the attack of the Kyuubi. I believed that it would be proof of how our plan would work." Konan was still uncertain about the plan, and I intended to set her mind at ease. "Of course," Toby said amicably. "So what happened?" The citizens and even the shinobi of Konoha did not have the reaction I expected. Rather than growing from the pain they experienced and seeking peace, they became more aggressive, hostile to outsiders, and even willing to attack the infant who had become the Jinchuriki. Toby cursed himself. Of course, he hadn't yet mentioned to Nagato that Jinchuriki were universally shunned and hated. If he had, he could have explained it so that it fit into the man's idealistic. "I see. That is unexpected." He tried not to sound too sarcastic. Now was a delicate time for Nagato, and he needed to remain in the man's goodwill. "So, what shall you do instead?" "Konan and I are going to search for a new answer," Nagato said. "We met our old sensei, Jiraiya, and thanks to him we can stay in Konoha for the time being. Konan fears that, since becoming shinobi, we have been too embroiled in war and death to know what is needed for peace." "That is possible," Toby said. Of course it was, that was his idea all along. He needed Nagato to remain single-mindedly focused on the plan, not to get distracted by things like this. His real goal, the Moon's Eye plan, needed the power of the Rinnegan, and Nagato needed to believe he was saving the world in his own way. He wasn't ready to accept that the real world was already beyond repair. A little crease formed between Nagato's eyebrows as he looked his masked ally up and down. "I must admit, I didn't expect you to agree to this so easily." Toby spread his hands wide, assuming an innocent posture. "I told you when we first met, I wished to work with a man who has been blessed with the Rinnegan to achieve world peace. If your method of attaining peace has changed, then I will honor that." "Thank you," Nagato said. "Don't mention it. You can still contact me at any time. If I can help you with something, let me know." "Thank you," Nagato said again. Space distorted around the eye hole of Toby's mask, sucking him into a vortex until he disappeared. As soon as he was gone, Konan entered the room and walked to Nagato's side. "I never liked that man," she said. Nagato shrugged. "He is a little strange," he admitted. "But I think we have already seen some equally strange folks here in Konoha." "Fair point," she agreed. "And Madara Uchiha did help found it, after all." "If it makes you feel better, we'll keep him as a last resort contact," Nagato offered. "Especially if Jiraiya is willing to help us, we'll rarely need Madara's assistance." "Thanks," she said. A piercing cry reached them. Konan hurried out of the room, and Nagato followed at a slower pace, his contraption not moving quite as fast as her. He found her in the small nursery just down the hall. She'd already gotten the bottle for the baby, and he had quieted down as he was feeding. "This will be unlike anything we have ever done," he commented. "I know. But if we left him to grow up in the orphanage, dealing with this village's attitude towards him, there's no telling what he might become one day. And we don't want a wild Jinchuriki running around." "I understand," he agreed. He looked down at Naruto Uzumaki. The baby was smiling now as he gurgled up at them. "But I have a feeling this will not be easy." Toby rematerialized in a cavern hundreds of miles away from Konoha. He stalked angrily through the lair, pulling off his mask to reveal a scarred face with only one eye. "Zetsu?" he called out. A black and white being rose up out of the ground at once. "Yes?" the black half asked seriously. "What's up?" the white half asked. "Nagato has changed his mind. He's not seeking to gather the Biju anymore." "Can we kill him?" Black asked. "I don't know. But now he's living in Konoha. If we battle each other there, he might have enough allies to tip the odds in his favor." Black Zetsu grumbled something. "He still believes we're on his side, right?" "Of course. I'm not stupid. But we should continue to manipulate him. We can still gather the Biju on our own, we'll just need to wait for the right time to reclaim the Rinnegan and seal them into the Jito Meizo. If we start collecting them, he'll notice before too long. Then be discreet. And wait for the right time." "Fine. He still wants to achieve world peace. If he gets involved in his own plans heavily enough, we can get away with acquiring the Biju one at a time." But Black Zetsu said. "Then that's our plan. Keep an eye on him for me too. His woman doesn't trust us as much as he does and we need to keep up to date with his plans. Very well. That'll be boring, White Zetsu complained. Can't we do something else? Uruguru can do those other things, Toby said. Now get to work. There's no time to waste. See you later, Black Zetsu said as he and White sank into the earth and vanished from sight. Toby stormed out of the room. He was still furious with Nagato and Konan. Here he was, trying to save the world the only way possible, and those two couldn't just trust him and do their jobs properly. This was going to make everything 10 times as difficult. Hey Uncle Nagato. Nagato's diva path pain turned to see a blonde ball of energy running up to him. He bore the young boy's excitement with the ease of long practice. Naruto had recently turned 6 years old, and ever since he was 4, Nagato and Konan had had their hands full keeping up with him. While he wasn't malicious, he loved to explore and find adventure. The two rain ninja did all they could to keep him out of trouble, but more and more often he managed to slip away long enough to stir up mischief. Luckily, the third Hokage liked Naruto and didn't hold Nagato and Konan accountable for his antics. Part of that, Nagato suspected, was because the old man was terribly amused at how the possessor of the Rinnegan couldn't keep track of one child. Hey, Naruto exclaimed. Nagato realized he'd gotten sidetracked thinking of the past. Calm down, Naruto, he put his hand on the boy's shoulder and Naruto managed to stand still for a minute instead of bouncing up and down. He was still trembling with excitement. What is it? Nagato asked patiently. How do you and Aunt Konan do all those cool things? I want to do them too. Nagato's eyes widened when he realized Naruto wanted to learn jutsus. He shouldn't be surprised, Naruto had talked about being a ninja for as long as he could speak. But for a 6-year-old to start learning ninjutsu thanks to his Rinnegan, he could see that the boy's chakra coils were already sufficiently developed, so it was perfectly possible for him to learn. But was it a good idea to teach him at this age? What if that power went to his head? He was a Jinchuriki, they couldn't afford for him to become arrogant and dangerous. Then he looked into his ward's shining, eager eyes and sighed in defeat. Naruto would mope for weeks if Nagato said no, and his mood would affect all of them. Yes, I suppose I can teach you a simple jutsu. You'll be starting at the academy in a few months, it won't hurt to get a head start. He let Naruto whoop and cheer excitedly for a minute, then put his hands together and focused. With a puff of smoke, he turned into a copy of the third Hokage. This is the transformation jutsu, also known as henge, he said. I'll teach you this to begin with. Konan came into the room at that moment. Mind keeping the noise down? She grumbled sleepily. I was having a great dream just a minute ago. Sorry, Uncle Nagato's teaching me jutsus. Naruto exclaimed. Konan blinked in surprise. Already? Are you sure his chakra coils can handle it? Yes, I'm positive, Nagato assured her. He tilted his head curiously. What were you dreaming about? Her cheeks reddened and she glanced at the floor. Nothing important. I'm gonna go get dressed. She turned around and hurried back to her room before Nagato could ask her anything else. 3 months later found Konan walking Naruto to the academy for his first day. She was dressed in a grey cloak over typical skin-tight ninja clothes. Her blue hair was longer than in her youth, tied back in a short ponytail. A simple metal stud adorned her face, set just under her lower lip. But she wasn't the reason everyone stared as they passed by. Naruto had that honor. 6 years ago, when she and Nagato had chosen to raise Naruto, they'd convinced the Hokage that keeping the facts about the Kyuubi a secret was a bad idea. Whether they could talk about it or not, the people would still hate Naruto for being a Jinchuriki. If they could discuss it freely, it would at least be out in the open instead of festering just under the surface. Plus, that way, Nagato and Konan would know who to defend him from. Add that automatic infamy to Naruto's reputation as a merry trickster, and what you got was a rambunctious child that the village didn't know what to do with. Many of them wanted to hate the boy, and the pranks didn't help, but the presence of Nagato and Konan kept everybody at a safe distance. They'd made sure of that 3 years ago, when a group of civilians broke into their apartment. The sight of 100 armed men and women being thrown into the air by Nagato's Shinra Tensei, then falling only to be thrown back up over and over again, until they were all too sick and dizzy to stand when he finally let them down, had made quite the impression. Ironically, their apartment complex was now considered one of the safest areas in the entire village, so long as you didn't say anything bad about Naruto. The villagers, forced to merely watch Naruto's antics as he grew up, were henceforth frequently treated to the sight of Nagato dragging him to the Hokage Tower to apologize to Sarutobi, often carrying the boy by the collar, holding him aloft like a wayward puppy. It became a fairly common routine, and people had since remarked that they got worried when more than a week passed without such a scene. Seeing him act so much like a child, and one who was kept at least somewhat in line, had slowly made the villagers more accepting of him. Granted, it was in the same way that one accepted a thunderstorm, you couldn't do anything about it, so why bother getting angry? Nagato and Konan were pleased with that result. The worst that happened was a few rude comments here and there. The more die-hard Kyuubi haters still glared at them, and they had both been called demon-loving scum. But they had survived through far worse than some insults. Most people just kept their distance and sent them some wary looks. The more time passed, the more accepting people seemed to become. These days, there were even people who wouldn't cross to the other side of the street to avoid them. Konan always kept a pleasant face and smiled to everyone they walked past. Naruto never seemed to stop smiling unless someone called him the Kyuubi and often waved to other children. Some of them would smile and even hesitantly wave back. Sometimes the parents would grab their kid's hand and pull them away. Regardless, Naruto had become an adventurous and happy child. He always smiled and he loved his aunt and uncle and his grandpa Hokage. He'd met Jiraiya once and, despite thinking he was weird, was amazed by the Sanin's ninjutsu. Thinking back on it, Konan was fairly sure that was when he'd started talking about being a ninja. She sighed. All these years, and you're still giving us more work, Jiraiya-sensei. She and Naruto had reached the academy. They were early, and a lot of kids were milling about the front, meeting friends and happily talking about school. Konan glanced down at Naruto. As she'd expected, he had stopped, staring at the large crowd. His expression revealed equal amounts of joy and fear, and when she reached down to ruffle his hair, she could feel him trembling. "Why don't you go talk to someone?" she asked gently. Naruto looked up at her nervously. What if they don't like me?" Konan knelt down, bringing herself to his height. "Naruto-kun, you're a fun, happy boy who's their own age. Why wouldn't they like you?" "You know why," he scowled adorably, folding his arms over his chest. "If they're mean to you because of the Kyuubi, then go find someone else," she said. "Trust me, you'll find someone to be your friend here." "Okay," he said uncertainly. Konan looked around the courtyard. She smiled as her eyes landed on a particular person. "Come with me," she said. "I'll introduce you to someone." She took him by the hand and led him around the edge of the courtyard. Of course, she and Nagato knew that he was desperate to have friends. His reputation kept him safe, but also fairly isolated. That, more than anything, was why they were so willing to have him attend the academy. They had spent the last 6 years studying Jinchuriki, even spying on other villages to see what worked and what caused them to lose control. The one consistent fact they'd found was that, if there was someone important to the Jinchuriki, they were able to keep the Bijuu sealed longer. Nagato had originally said they needed to make sure Naruto loved them to help keep him stable. But even back then, Konan had known that, like it or not, they were already coming to love Naruto in return. But they had looked for others, people who might be friendly to Naruto. And right now, Konan was headed for what she considered their best bet. "Hisashi-san," she greeted the long-haired man with the wide eyes of the Hyuga clan. "Ah, Konan-san," he smiled and held out his hand. She shook it happily. "I wondered if we would be seeing you today. If we didn't let him go, I think he would have snuck out and come here anyway," Konan admitted, ruffling Naruto's hair again. Hisashi looked down at him, chuckling. "So, this is Naruto. I must say, you're taller than I expected." He chuckled again. "Though it's hard to judge when I only see you at a distance as your uncle carries you to the tower." Naruto pouted a little as the adults shared a laugh, but Konan could tell he was pleased by Hisashi's gentle ribbing. "And is this Neji?" she asked, looking at the mini Hisashi standing a little behind his father. Hisashi smiled proudly and drew his son out in front of him. "Neji, I'd like you to meet Konan, she's a good friend of mine and your uncle's. And this is her nephew, Naruto Uzumaki." Neji looked at Naruto curiously, but Konan was relieved to see that he didn't look distrustful or angry. He stuck his hand out, clearly feeling confident in himself as Naruto's upperclassman. "Hi," he greeted him. "You're new here, right?" "Yeah," Naruto said, shaking his hand. "I'll show you around," Neji offered. "Come on, it's a neat place." The two kids hurried off, saying goodbye over their shoulders. Konan chuckled again, happy to see the smile on her nephew's face. "He'll be fine," Hisashi assured her. "Neji will keep an eye on him." "Thank you," she offered him a short bow of her head. Hisashi chuckled, shaking his head. "Please, Konan-san, the Hyuga clan owes you and Nagato-san far more than this." "Nonsense," Konan said firmly. "We helped because it was the right thing to do, we already told you we don't want you to feel you have to repay us. We would have invited you to any number of events and festivals, but the clan elders feared what mischief Naruto-kun might get up to." "I can't say they were wrong," Konan admitted. "But if we can speak with you and Hisashi as friends, then we'll consider that debt repaid. I will let my brother know." He gave her a short graceful bow. "I'm afraid I have duties to attend to. Good day, Konan-san, and please pass along my best wishes to Nagato-san." "Thank you, and good day to you and Hisashi-san as well." She returned his bow, and the two of them left. For the first time in a long time, Konan felt happy. Everything in her life was going the right way. Her family, small though it was happy, there were no wars to get involved in, and she and Nagato were making plans to create a true everlasting peace in the world. Past experience should have warned her that, with everything going well, trouble was bound to arrive soon. The forests surrounding Konoha were an excellent strategic advantage. Not only could all kinds of traps and ambushes be set up without being noticed by invaders, but there was so much dangerous wildlife around that enemies had to constantly be on guard against poisonous or savage creatures. Of course, this also meant that the forests were the perfect place to meet in secret without anyone, even other Konoha shinobi, stumbling across you. Itachi had taken advantage of that fact since the first time he and his lover wanted some alone time. This meeting, however, was of an entirely different sort. Itachi looked up as he heard a quiet footstep. This man was very good. Most wouldn't have noticed a thing. Itachi looked him over impassively. Long black hair, like Itachi's but much wilder, hung about his shoulders. He wore black clothes that concealed his body completely, even his hands and neck. His face was hidden by an orange mask with a pattern of black flames around a single eyehole. "You're an Uchiha," Itachi said. It wasn't a question, despite this being their first real meeting. The man's stance was just like many of the older Uchihas in the village. Casual, but ready to slip into the clan's taijutsu stance at any moment. That in the hair and the ease with which the man had bypassed all the security measures in the Uchiha district, and Itachi was certain he was a part of the clan. "So are you," the masked man responded. "But you didn't tell the clan about seeing me." "The clan isn't what it used to be," Itachi admitted. "Surely you must have seen that for yourself." "Of course." The man's stance shifted ever so slightly, and Itachi got the impression he was irritated. They finally realized their folly in remaining subservient to Konoha all these years. Itachi raised an eyebrow. That was one of several responses he'd predicted. If his guesses were accurate, there was only one or two people who could be behind that mask. He needed to test them and find out for sure. "It's a shame that their coup won't go anywhere," he said casually. "The village leadership is already aware of the plot. It seems my friend Shisui wasn't terribly loyal to the clan after all." The masked man tilted his head slightly. "I see," he mused. "And Shisui will eliminate the whole clan himself." He didn't seem against the idea of the clan being destroyed, even though he disliked the village's behavior. A grudge against both, then. And he likely already understood that Itachi was also involved in betraying the clan's plot. "If we are lucky, Shisui will be able to stop the coup without fighting. And if you are not?" Itachi frowned. A warmonger, at least to some degree. Either that, or cynical and pessimistic. "Shisui will not fail." The masked man inclined his head slightly, acknowledging Itachi's confidence in his friend. "But misfortune abounds in this cursed world of ours. Well, I do hope that he succeeds. What would you do if it does not go according to plan?" Itachi was silent for several minutes. He knew what would happen, especially with the Hokage's advisors already pushing for a more violent solution to the problem. But he wasn't certain yet what he would do. At last, he spoke. "I would aid Shisui in eliminating all other shinobi in the clan. It would be difficult, but we would ensure that the clan is unable to carry out their coup." "Only the two of you?" "If other Konoha shinobi attack, that will leave the clan only more embittered towards the village. If we handle it, then it is an internal affair. We will also prove that some of the clan is loyal to the village." The masked man folded his arms over his chest and looked down at Itachi for a minute before speaking again. "I find it difficult to believe the two of you can handle the task yourselves." Itachi waited patiently. After a long silence, the masked man spoke. "If you require assistance in destroying the Uchiha clan, I can give it to you." "For what price?" The man grunted again, and this time Itachi was sure he caught a hint of amusement. But when he began speaking, his tone was all business again. "I would have the entire clan wiped out. I will leave you and Shisui alive, but all others, not just shinobi, would not be allowed to survive." Itachi went utterly still. Faces jumped to mind, his aunts and uncles, dozens of cousins, and of course, his little brother. So many members of the clan were not shinobi. This condition would easily triple the number of corpses. His first instinct, of course, was to adamantly refuse. But he caught himself. Upsetting this man, especially if Itachi was right as to his identity, was a bad idea. Instead, he tried to keep his voice as casual as possible while replying, "If we do require help, we shall keep you in mind." The masked man gave a curt nod. A moment later, he looked up sharply. Itachi's hand flew to his sword as he shifted into a battle-ready stance. But all that happened was that it began to rain, thick drops, making their way past the trees and splattering on the ground and the two men. The masked man glanced at Itachi. "I dislike the rain. I will be here every night at this time if you wish to meet again." He turned and left, leaping into the trees and vanishing from sight. Itachi watched him leave, waiting until he was sure he had traveled a good distance before turning his back and heading to the village. His thoughts were in turmoil the whole way back. While he abhorred the thought of killing even the civilian clan members, especially as that would include the children who were completely innocent, it was certainly true that he and Shisui alone may not be able to kill the rest of the clan. If they went at it carefully, assassinating one target at a time without raising the alarm, it was possible. But as the masked man had said, anything could go wrong. And even one mistake could put the clan on their guard, ready to kill Itachi and Shisui. That would ruin the whole plan. The clan would launch their coup as soon as possible, and a desperate attack would only serve to make the whole situation even more chaotic and turbulent. There was no good outcome there. Arriving at the compound, he quietly made his way to Shisui's room. They would need to discuss this. He'd meant to warn the masked man away from the village, but found himself returning with the most unexpected choice. He entered through a side door that no one else knew about. "Shisui, we have to." He stopped talking abruptly as he stared at his friend. Shisui chuckled at his expression. "Looks like we both have something to talk about," he said, raising his hand to touch the side of his empty eye socket. Naruto grinned in anticipation as he and Sasuke stepped into the ring. He and the Uchiha had been at odds since the first day of school, when Sasuke had greeted him as Fox Boy. They'd been pitted against each other in sparring matches once or twice, but now they had a chance for a real fight. The academy finals had different rules than the regular spars, so they would keep fighting until one of them conceded or couldn't continue to fight, rather than just whenever the teacher told them to stop. "I've been waiting for this," Sasuke said eagerly, bouncing slightly on the balls of his feet. Naruto's grin widened, taking on a slightly feral appearance. "Bring it, duckhead." "You got it, Fox Boy." The rest of the class winced as Naruto's eyes narrowed sharply. Haruka sighed. He hoped this ended quickly, because Naruto was going to be merciless after that. "Make the sign of combat," he instructed them. Both boys did so, raising one hand in a half seal. "Begin," he ordered, slashing his hand down. Sasuke made the first move, lunging at Naruto, with the hope of gaining the upper hand from the beginning. Blocking the first punch, Naruto found himself on the defensive against a furious assault from Sasuke. He dodged and blocked numerous punches and kicks before finding an opening. Dodging a kick to the head, he grabbed Sasuke's leg and yanked it hard, throwing the Uchiha off balance. Sasuke caught himself and sprang back to his feet, but Naruto was faster. Sasuke barely had time to see the punch coming before it caught him square in the jaw. Falling to the mat, he lashed out instinctively, scissoring his legs into Naruto's and knocking the Jinchuriki off his feet. He rolled over, going for a grapple, even as Naruto tried the same thing. In seconds, the two of them were locked together, Sasuke trying to break Naruto's arm as Naruto tried to choke him unconscious. They struggled for a few seconds, then Naruto's arm popped loudly, all the other students wincing or gasping as Naruto gave a cry of pain, his grip on Sasuke loosening. Sasuke let go, coming to his feet and smirking down at Naruto. A moment later, Naruto's foot landed firmly in Sasuke's stomach, knocking the wind out of him. The Uchiha was lifted an inch or two off the ground by the force of the blow, then collapsed on the mat, gasping for breath. Naruto rolled over and got on top of him, one knee on Sasuke's chest and his hand around Sasuke's throat. "I think that's it, sensei," he said cheekily, grinning down at Sasuke. The dark-haired boy was still struggling to breathe properly, a task not made easier by Naruto's weight pressing down on him. "Alright, get off him," Haruka ordered. "Naruto, you win." Naruto got off Sasuke, then walked over to the training dummies, confusing everyone but Haruka. Taking a deep breath, he rammed his dislocated shoulder into a dummy, popping it back into place. "Come on Sasuke, you should know by now," Kiba teased the Uchiha. "You can't trust what you see in a fight with Naruto." "That was a clever trick," Haruka admitted. "Befitting of a shinobi." Naruto grinned broadly as he retook his seat. His friends all congratulated him, and Hinata gave him a proud smile. Sasuke glared moodily at them as he sat down on the other side of the sparring ring. Several of his fans tried to cheer him up, girls who were smitten with him and boys trying to earn his family's favor, but he brushed them all off. Haruka watched a byplay between his two best students and sighed despondently. There had never been a kind word spoken between them, and the rest of the class was separated by which one they supported. Sasuke had more followers, but most of the clan heirs were Naruto's friends. Both Haruka and Mizuki had spoken with each of the boys, trying to convince them to befriend the other or at least lighten up and stop fighting, but nothing worked. If they could ever get along, not only would the class be much less volatile, but the village would gain two future shinobi with incredible talent and a close friendship. Even though he'd tried everything, Haruka still felt like he was failing as a teacher by not putting an end to their feud. Setting aside the impossible task, he moved on with the test spars. Most of the fights went as predicted. Kiba beat Choji due to raw aggressiveness, Shikamaru fought Shino for 5 seconds before conceding the match, and Hinata narrowly eked out a win against Ino. That last fight interested him. At the start of the year, he would have said without a doubt that it would go the other way. The shy Hyuga heir didn't have the grit and confidence needed to fight seriously. Then her cousin Niji had introduced her to Naruto, and remaining a shy little wallflower was no longer possible for her. Being close friends with Naruto, who valued anyone willing to call him a friend more than he would a mountain of gold, meant Hinata was constantly getting pulled into the spotlight. Whenever Naruto got in a fight with upperclassmen, or pulled a prank on one of the teachers, or simply broke the rules in spectacular fashion, his friends backed him up. Hinata had stuttered and stammered through the first couple instances, but repeated exposure had done a marvelous job of clearing away her fear. And as she developed more of a backbone, not only did her performance in school improve, but Naruto wound up paying her more attention as he grew impressed by her. Haruka had even heard that she joined his family for extracurricular training sessions. In most cases, no clan head in the world would allow his heir to train under another ninja, especially a foreigner. But not only was Nagato counted as a friend to the Hyuga, there was also no ninja in history who would pass up the opportunity to train under the man who possessed the Rinnegan. Setting aside that train of thought, Haruka wrapped up the tests and bade the children farewell for 2 days. They would come back for the last day of school to receive their final assessments for the year. In the meantime, he hoped Naruto and Sasuke wouldn't seek an excuse to fight outside of school. It wouldn't be the first time, and he doubted the Uchiha would appreciate a repeat of the incident that collapsed one of their old temples. Sarutobi took a long pull on his pipe as he mulled over Itachi's report. The Uchiha heir sat quietly on the other side of the desk, waiting patiently for his leader's orders. Shisui's combat ability has been compromised, but even if we risk the political nightmare that confronting Danzo would cause, there is not time to restore his eye and put a stop to the coup, Sarutobi summarized. You and he may still be able to stop your father, but Danzo is clearly not ready to let this end quietly. He will do whatever he feels is necessary to stop the clan. Sir? Itachi interrupted politely. At the Hokage's nod, he continued. I had heard of Danzo's secret Anbu division, Root. But I thought they were forcibly disbanded after it was discovered that they committed acts which extended the last great ninja war. Sarutobi nodded. The organization was disbanded and all of their documentation was taken or destroyed. However, a fair number were more loyal to Danzo than to the village, and they would be willing to still answer to him in a situation like this. And Danzo himself has always been a strong political player, allying himself with both the shinobi and civilian leadership. He has many strengths. I see, Itachi mused, adjusting his cat mask as he thought. I can think of no alternatives that are not extreme. Yes, we wouldn't want to do anything more severe than brainwashing your own father, Sarutobi said dryly. However, I agree with your assessment that other Konoha shinobi should not attack the clan. Ideally, this should be handled internally, Uchiha stopping Uchiha. Otherwise, the survivors' hatred for the village will only intensify. Shisui and myself are not enough, Itachi said numbly. The answer was clear. He knew exactly what needed to be done, but he could feel ice forming in the pit of his stomach at the mere thought of it. He was grateful for the mask, or Sarutobi would surely know he was feeling more than mere depression. We must find an answer, Sarutobi insisted. May I have 1 week, Hokage-sama? The coup is not planned to begin for over a month. Shisui's condition, even if he allows the clan leaders to discover it, will not move it up that quickly. Sarutobi nodded as he emptied and then refilled his pipe. That is acceptable. We must consider this carefully, Itachi, and make no reckless moves. The safety of the village depends on us. Of course, Hokage-sama. Yes, the village was depending on them. And Itachi had sworn to protect it at any costs. Even when that cost included his own family. Naruto looked ecstatic as he ran into the house. Uncle Nagato, he called out. Check it out. He raced up to his uncle. Technically it was Nagato's Diva Path, which had become his primary means of interaction with the world, and thrust his report card at the man. Nagato blinked owlishly several times, looking at Naruto with a befuddled expression. Konan recognized the look. He'd been focused on something else, somewhere else, and needed a moment to reorient himself. Naruto just got his grades for the first year, she said, both explaining the situation and buying her friend a few more seconds to pull himself away from whatever other matters were going on. Oh, I see, he said, taking the paper from Naruto's hand. He flicked it open, looking it over closely. Konan knew what it said already and had congratulated Naruto herself, but she knew he wanted to hear Nagato's praise as well. After a few seconds of reading, he looked at his nephew, his ripple-patterned blue eyes fixing the boy with an intense look. Naruto abruptly looked nervous, and Konan sighed. She wished Nagato wouldn't wind their nephew up like that. Perfect scores on everything, except getting along with the Uchihas and letting the classroom stay peaceful, he finally said. Well, you can't have everything, I guess. Naruto broke into a relieved grin as Nagato patted him on the head. So can we have a party? He asked eagerly. Naruto, you didn't need a perfect score to throw a party, Konan told him. We've already sent out invitations to your friends. As Naruto whooped and cheered, she set about making him a large bowl of ramen. Once he was ensconced in eating it, she and Nagato stepped out of the dining room to speak privately. "What's happening?" she asked softly. "Is it one of the pains?" Pain shook his head. "The rain," he replied. Konan frowned. Of course, she knew that the rain outside was his doing. She'd worked with him too long to be unable to sense his chakra lingering within the water. While she'd at first wondered if it was necessary to spy on the village they'd come to call home, it had proved invaluable when Kumagakure went after the Hyugas. If Pain had sensed something within the village that bothered him. "Who is it? Should we tell the Hokage?" Pain shook his head. "No. Not right away. I need to ascertain this threat personally first." "What is it?" He hesitated and she immediately felt a rush of fear. Anything that could make Pain nervous was terrifying. The single word he gave her in answer proved that. "Madara." Itachi sat alone in his room, staring blankly at the wall. He had done what was asked, giving Shisui's note to the Anbu and requesting assistance in looking into his friend's death. Now he was mentally going over it all, ensuring that he and Shisui had covered all of their tracks personally. And at the same time, fighting down the pain that attacked him every time he recalled Shisui's final moments. They were more than friends. They were brothers. And Itachi had been the one to throw him into the river, killing his brother with his own hands. He opened one of those hands, revealing the glass container holding Shisui's left eye. A powerful weapon in the wrong hands, capable of controlling anyone effortlessly. Itachi wished it had never existed, never caused Shisui to become a target. Never forced Itachi to kill him before Danzo could reach him and awaken his own Mangekyo to accomplish their final goal. He was thankful for the rain outside. His clan's pride in their fire techniques left them with a dislike of the rain, and that meant he was unlikely to be interrupted. Biting his thumb, he performed a quick summoning, drawing one of his crow allies to his side. The little bird looked at him quizzically. Like the majority of his summons, they were intelligent and could understand human speech, but couldn't speak it and required the assistance of either their summoner or a more powerful summons to perform any jutsus. But this was enough for what he needed. "This eye is special," he explained, holding it up for the bird to see. "My best friend died to keep it out of the wrong hands. I need to know that it's safe, that no one can find it. Will you allow me to gift it to you?" The crow was nodding before he'd even finished talking, making Itachi feel even worse. These brave and loyal creatures deserved a far better summoner than him. He could hardly look it in the eye long enough to perform the simple surgery, giving his friend's eye life again as it stared at him from the crow. Not wanting to see it for a moment longer, Itachi thanked the crow and then banished it. Alone once more, Itachi turned his thoughts to what would happen next. Even if they had used Shisui's Mangekyo to stop the coup, Danzo wouldn't allow it to end just like that. So the only solution was to eliminate the clan. And even with his own newfound Mangekyo, Itachi couldn't do that alone. He had 4 days before he had to report to the Hokage. The masked man had met him last night. They would meet once more to decide when to wipe out the clan. Itachi would have to agree to killing even the civilians, but he would make a plea for the life of Sasuke. If he could only save one person, he would pick his little brother. It may have been selfish, but Itachi was only human. His train of thought was interrupted by a gentle tap at the door. Had his father, or another high-ranking clan member, noticed the summoning? He got up and walked to the door, an explanation already rising to his lips. When he opened the door, that explanation died before he even opened his mouth. Itachi could only stare at the orange-haired man standing before him. "Hello, Itachi-san," Nagato greeted him politely. "May I come in?" Itachi's manners kicked in. "Of course," he answered, stepping back and gesturing into his room. Nagato removed his wet shoes and entered. Shutting the door, Itachi found himself merely staring again at the Rinnegan master. "Wondering why I'm here?" Nagato asked, a small smile on his lips as he looked at Itachi's befuddled expression. The Anbu captain quickly schooled his features into a blank mask. "Yes," he answered honestly. "We have never met, after all. And I am unsure what business you could have with me." "Ah, well, that is a bit of a delicate topic," Nagato began. The man's expression sharpened, his previous humor vanishing as he turned to face Itachi directly. "You see, I discovered recently that you encountered a rather unique individual." Itachi's heart rate increased for a second before he controlled himself. His expression gave away nothing. "Who might you be referring to?" "I meet with many people in my work." "This man wouldn't have met you on official business. Missing nin tend not to. And I think you are aware enough of who he is that you wouldn't meet without good reason. Which can only lead me to conclude that you are in a dangerous situation, to be forced to go to him." "I'm not sure what you're talking about, Nagato-san," Itachi said coolly. "But it sounds as if you suspect me of conspiring against the village with a missing nin." Nagato shook his head once. "You don't strike me as that sort. No, let me be a little more to the point." He paused for a moment, as if to gather his thoughts before continuing. You met with this individual twice in the last week. The man in the mask, with one eye. Itachi's heart rate increased again. Nagato knew the masked man too. In between those meetings, your friend Shisui was killed under mysterious circumstances. It was a suicide, Itachi corrected him. Nagato ignored that and kept speaking. Given that the man in the mask, one I happen to know is a member of your clan, hates the Uchiha, I am curious why a loyal clansman like you would have anything to do with him. However, with the recent death of Shisui, it occurred to me that, perhaps, you are not quite as loyal as you appear. His deep blue eyes with a ripple pattern bored into Itachi's grey eyes. His stare was hard and unyielding. Although he made no threats, it was only because they both knew it was unnecessary. The only possessor of the Rinnegan was, by definition, a threat. And if you believe this, Nagato-san, why are you here alone, without the Hokage or Anbu? Because I know firsthand that our world is a complicated place. I hope to give you the chance to explain yourself before condemning you to the less than tender mercies of a hidden village. So, this was it. Either tell him the truth, for Itachi was certain there would be no lying to this man, or fight a man with a power that hadn't been seen in centuries. It only took a few seconds to reach the depressing yet inevitable decision. I did not know for sure who the masked man was when we first met, he explained. And Shisui asked me to kill him and destroy his eye in order to keep it out of the wrong hands. Nagato didn't seem surprised. He merely nodded once, gesturing for Itachi to continue. I am loyal, but not to my clan, not anymore. Itachi kept his voice down now, to make sure nobody but this man heard him. My fellow Uchihas, he allowed his distaste for the clan to show in his voice, are plotting a coup. The Hokage is already aware of this, but when Danzo attacked Shisui and took one of his eyes, we lost our best means of preventing the coup. Of course, each eye only affects one target. With one missing, he could not influence both your mother and father. And so you met with your distant relative to seek his assistance for a different method of stopping the clan, Nagato supplied. Itachi frowned a little. It seemed that Nagato was fully aware of what Shisui's eyes could do, and also of the kind of men Danzo and Madara were. He shouldn't be surprised by this casual display of knowledge, but he was. Until now, he'd most often seen Nagato in the role of Naruto Uzumaki's guardian, hauling the Jinchuriki to the Hokage's office to apologize for yet another mishap in the town. For him to possess such information was a little off-putting. But Itachi brushed it aside. He was Anbu, he'd learned not to judge by appearances. I'm afraid so, he admitted. I have no one else to turn to. And I must act fast, before Danzo moves against them. And the Hokage can't assign other Leaf Ninja to aid you, because that would only worsen the relationship between your clan and the village. Itachi nodded numbly. Nagato had summed up the situation quite well. Please do not think less of me for this choice. I have no alternatives. I will agree to the masked man's request, and I will accept the dishonor of slaying my clan. That last sentence got the first real reaction out of Nagato. His patterned eyes narrowed and he looked at Itachi even more sharply than before. The clan. Do you speak of the ninjas? The adults? Itachi shook his head miserably. All of them. His voice was hollow and utterly dead. Madara hates the clan. This is his decision, not yours. It wasn't a question. I would have killed only the ninjas. Instead, I will plead for the life of my younger brother, Itachi said. I will not live as the only survivor. That will fall to Sasuke. I will become a disgraced missing nin, and he will one day avenge our family by killing me. Through him, our clan will at least be restored to glory. He looked Nagato square in the eye. This will be my burden. The village will not know of the clan's plot. They will only know of their tragic massacre at my hand. Nagato was shaking his head. No, Itachi. You cannot go through with this. I must, Itachi stated. You said it yourself. There is no other option. Yes, there is. They cannot be stopped except by force. I cannot handle the whole clan alone. And if Leaf Nin aid me, it will only further embitter the clan against the village. Madara has the power to help me kill them all, despite the awful price. But Madara is not the only powerful foreign ninja you know, Nagato reminded him. Itachi went stock still, the words sinking in. He looked the man before him up and down. The dark cloak, with hints of armor beneath, no obvious weapons on his person. Many black piercings decorated his face. His spiky orange hair was striking, yet made him appear mysterious and eerie more than foolish. And lastly, those eyes. Blue all the way around, without any whites. And black circles surrounding his pupils, forming the unique cripple pattern of the Rinnegan. A genetic mutation, many believed, that hadn't been seen since the time of the Sage of Six Paths, over 2,000 years ago. And suddenly, Itachi felt hope. It was slim, but he grabbed onto it desperately. You will help me? He asked. You will stop this coup? The ninjas must die, Nagato said. They cannot be trusted, even in prison. But the rest will survive. Itachi almost collapsed from sheer relief. He would still kill family, but not all of them. most would survive. It was enough that he wanted to weep with joy. Nagato seemed to understand, as he merely placed a hand on Itachi's shoulder, offering gentle support to the 13-year-old Anbu captain. Once Itachi regained control of himself, he straightened up. An important question jumped to his lips as he faced Nagato. Why? Nagato's answer was simple and straightforward. Madara is not an individual whom I place great trust in. And I disapprove of his price. His face hardened. Understand, though, that any of your family members who know of the coup and have not reported it to the Hokage are traitors. They will live, but in terrible disgrace. Even if I could do something to change that, I would not. I do understand, Itachi said. It embarrasses me that so many of my family would agree to this. I am glad that we are on the same page here. Now then, Nagato's voice became businesslike. When is the best time for the assault? In 2 nights, the clan ninjas will meet to discuss their plans. With all of them gathered in one location, it will be easy to contain and eliminate them. Good. Do you have a summons? So, at least there was something he wasn't aware of. Even the Rinnegan didn't make him all-knowing. Though it may have been just a polite gesture. I do, Itachi said. Crows. Use one to contact me 2 hours before the assault is to begin, Nagato ordered. And I assume that we will not be informing anyone, even the Hokage, until after we have finished. Yes, Itachi confirmed. I have great respect for Sarutobi-sama, but his hope is to end the coming conflict peacefully. He underestimates my parents' dedication. I can keep a secret. No one will know, Nagato stated confidently. If that is all, I will leave now. At Itachi's nod, the Nagato that stood before him suddenly burst into a cloud of smoke that dissipated in seconds. Itachi was stunned. It had been a shadow clone. He hadn't suspected a thing throughout the whole conversation. He shivered at the realization of how skilled Nagato likely was to produce such a convincing copy. He may have traded one malicious ally for an even stronger benevolent one. Naruto came bounding up to his aunt and uncle, looking hopeful. Nagato grimaced internally as he faced the boy. I know we just had a party here yesterday, he began. Nagato sighed. The evidence of the party was still visible. Plates and cups strewn all over the living room, training shurikens still stuck in the target where they'd competed, and a thoroughly empty fridge and pantry. We can't have another party, he cut off his nephew. Naruto shook his head frantically. No, Choji invited me over. His family's throwing a festival tonight and there's gonna be a lot of food and all my friends will be there. Can I go? Nagato pondered the question. Konan had agreed to stay behind, her paper jutsus were better for espionage and capturing than killing, unless she simply spammed explosive notes. She would keep some lookout stationed throughout the Uchiha compound and one of his paths would be with her to keep them in contact. But she could manage to do that and take Naruto to a party. On the other hand, his stomach tightened uncomfortably at the thought of Naruto being elsewhere. While he was certain that Itachi and himself would wipe out the clan ninjas, there was always the chance that the civilians would try to revolt on their own, even if it was suicide. Riots always led to some amount of collateral damage. His instinct, looking at the young boy, was to do everything to keep him safe. Which meant keeping him in their seal-laden, trap-covered, and exceptionally secure house. Not tonight, Naruto. I have some rather important business I must attend to. And Konan could take me. Naruto exclaimed hopefully. Nagato shook his head. She will be helping me from a distance. I can't afford for her concentration to be split. Please, Uncle Nagato. Naruto begged. Everyone will be there. Why can't I go? I'm sorry, but it's a bad time, Naruto. There will be plenty of other parties for you to attend. No amount of whining or pleading would budge him, but it took half an hour for Naruto to stop trying. The boy eventually ran to his room, yelling at his aunt and uncle the whole way. We've spoiled him, Konan remarked as soon as Naruto's door slammed shut. The loving family to support the Jinchuriki will improve its chances of controlling the Bijuu, Nagato reminded her. Konan chuckled. Nagato, when are you going to admit that Naruto isn't just the Jinchuriki we're keeping an eye on? Nagato gave her a flat look and said nothing. She rolled her eyes in exasperation. Of course, for a man who had briefly styled himself a god, admitting he'd come to see Naruto as practically a son would hurt his pride too much. Stupid male egos. Well, he's locked himself in his room for the night. I'll make him dinner when he comes out. You should get ready to meet with Itachi. Of course. Your eyes are already in position. For the last 2 hours, she confirmed. The Uchiha ninjas are all in the compound, but they haven't begun any sort of meeting just yet. Itachi's summons came less than an hour ago. He stood up, straightening his grey cloak. This was his diva path, the former body of Yahiko, but he so frequently used it as his interface with the world that even Konan could briefly forget the truth. I will go meet him and we can prepare. He clasped Konan's shoulder in a friendly way. I'll keep in touch. Clapping his hands together, he performed a technique. A puff of smoke heralded the arrival of the Naraka path. A second later, the diva path vanished in its own puff of smoke. Konan shifted her attention to the information being sent to her by the origami butterflies scattered across the Uchiha compound. As Itachi had promised, the Uchiha ninjas were all gathered in one of their meeting halls. A mere 4 sentries stood guard, more to keep out the civilian clan members than anything else. Itachi himself stood in a dark passage between 2 buildings half a block from the meeting, dressed in his Anbu gear. Nagato's diva path joined him, the hood of his grey cloak pulled up to cover his distinctive hair. It would come down when the assault began. "You're ready for this?" he asked Itachi. The teenager nodded slowly. Even behind his cat mask, it was clear that he was nervous. Nagato couldn't blame him. Raising one hand, he watched as an origami butterfly flitted down to land on his finger. "Prepare the barrier," he told Konan. "We'll eliminate the guards and then enter the meeting hall in exactly 180 seconds from now." The butterfly took off as Itachi and Nagato set out. The pair separated, each going after a different sentry. Both approached stealthily, their targets oblivious, stepping out of the shadows just long enough to deliver a single fatal stab while covering the target's mouth to silence them. Dragging their victims back into the shadows, the 2 men placed the bodies in alcoves so they wouldn't be discovered, then went after the other sentries. Repeating the maneuver, they removed the clan's guards. No one could raise an alarm in time to stop them now. Only 142 seconds had passed. Maintaining their stealth, the 2 shinobi approached the meeting hall, both counting down the seconds in their heads. 5, 4, 3, 2. He and Itachi threw the doors open on opposite sides of the meeting hall. As the assembled Uchihas looked around in shock, a barrier of crimson energy sprang up around the building, sealing everyone inside. "Uchiha Fugaku, Uchiha Mikoto, you and your clan are guilty of treason," he announced, amplifying his voice with chakra so it boomed through the meeting hall. "Who are you to accuse us?" Fugaku demanded. The clan head was a strong man, with many years of experience battling shinobi, and had honed both his body and chakra since he was a child. To anyone else, he would have been a terribly intimidating figure, especially when backed up by over 100 of his loyal clan members. Nagato lowered his hood, enjoying the sight of over 100 well-trained Uchihas, each with a functioning Sharingan, flinched back at the sight of his distinctive eyes and hair. "I am he of the 6 paths, the master of the Rinnegan. And I stand with one of your own, who is loyal to the village that all of you swore to protect." "What?" Fugaku demanded, Sharingan activating as he turned to Itachi. His face paled, and he took a step back as he recognized his son's chakra. "Itachi." He gasped, voice thick with shock. "You have gone too far, father. You left me with no choice," the teenager said firmly, drawing his sword. "My son, you have seen how weak the village is. They don't deserve your loyalty." Nagato laughed, the sound echoing in the large space. "Oh, Fugaku, you know so little of true strength. Take it from one who grew up in a warzone, this village is mightier than you could imagine. And as the Hokage's hands are tied, I have no compunctions against lending him some help. Every last one of you failed to report the coup, and so you are all guilty. Your sentence is death. Effective immediately." Before they could do more than activate their Sharingans en masse, he clapped his hands together. A summoning array formed on the floor, right in the center of the room. An instant later, a giant 2-headed dog burst forth, tearing into the traitorous ninjas with gusto. As they turned to the obvious immediate threat, Itachi and Nagato dashed into their midst, wasting no time and throwing killing blows every which way. Caught between 3 enemies, the Uchihas soon found themselves facing a massacre. It was a testament to Sasuke's dedication that he didn't notice the explosions in the distance, being too intent on studying ahead for next year. But when clan members began screaming just outside the house, it got his attention enough for him to get up and go to the window. On seeing smoke rising from one of the clan's main attendance halls, he thought for a moment that someone must have been careless with a fire jutsu. It wouldn't have been the first time. Then the clan members running away from that location, faces stricken with horror, and the transparent red barrier around the building in question, finally registered for him. Springing out the window, he raced up to an uncle, a clan blacksmith, who was standing nearby and speaking with one of Sasuke's cousins. "What's happening, Uncle Tetsu?" The older man looked down at him, and Sasuke thought it was the first time he'd ever seen an adult so confused. The clan ninjas were meeting over there, and just minutes ago this happened. But everyone who saw is saying impossible things. They say that they're attacking us with monsters, and that the wrath of the gods is upon us. And they say. He hesitated, staring down into Sasuke's young, innocent, bewildered eyes. He knew the next bit would hurt the child immensely, even if it wasn't true, but Tetsu Uchiha had never been one to lie, especially to family. In the end, the old man couldn't stop himself from speaking. "They say your brother has turned on us. That Itachi is killing clansmen." Sasuke wanted to deny it, to call the old man a liar, but the past few weeks flashed by his eyes in a heartbeat, all the odd things Itachi had said and done. The truth resonated deep within him, and as he fell to his knees in despair, he knew that his world was falling apart. Nagato watched as the dog, now with 5 heads, and the centipede chomped down on 2 Uchihas. The crab he had summoned as a shield also served as a good platform from which to see the battlefield. The building hadn't lasted past the first 15 seconds, and they had been fighting for almost 5 minutes. Much of that was because of the Sharingan. With their nearly precognitive vision, the Uchihas were quite capable of avoiding lethal injuries and finding openings to counterattack. That was why Nagato had summoned up more of his creatures to force them into corners and land killing blows. He had come through unscathed, though the same could not be said for Itachi. Speaking of which, the one loyal Uchiha had lost his mask at some point and was currently locked in a staring match with his father, Fugaku. Nagato could tell they were warring with Genjutsu, but even he couldn't see just what illusions they were casting on each other. He drew a short sword, ready to leap to Itachi's aid if it proved necessary. Then Fugaku's eyes fluttered closed. He breathed out his last word so softly that Nagato almost missed the reluctantly proud "well done" the man gave to his son. Then Fugaku collapsed, falling towards his son. Itachi easily adjusted his sword so that the blade pierced his father's heart, killing him quickly. Looking around the carnage, Nagato saw Makoto with a similarly precise stab wound on her chest, not far from her husband and son. "It's over, Itachi," Nagato said, dispelling his summons with a casual wave of his hand. "They've all been executed." The teenager let his sword drop onto the bodies near him. Nagato remembered the day he had killed Yahiko, recalling the agony he had felt then. Stepping around the cooling bodies, he approached Itachi, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "This was awful," he said calmly, looking at Itachi's peculiar pinwheel-patterned eyes and ignoring the implications of that shape. "It was a great tragedy that we were forced to do this, and all we can say is that refusing to act would have allowed a far more horrible tragedy to befall others. Think of the lives you have saved, the family that still lives, and the villagers that you have spared." "I know," Itachi said dully, his gaze a million miles away even while he met Nagato's eyes. "I know I did the right thing." His voice cracked on the last 2 words, and he squeezed his eyes shut, clearly trying to force down tears. Nagato wondered what to say or do, what might convince him that killing his own parents was acceptable. For years afterward, he would ponder what caused him to do what he did next. He stepped forward, putting his arms around Itachi and hugging the boy gently. The Uchiha stiffened, then leaned into it, clutching Nagato's cloak and sobbing against his shoulder. Nagato simply patted him on the back, offering support. It took a few minutes for Itachi to get control of himself, but he did eventually let go of Nagato's cloak and straighten up, wiping at his tears. "I apologize, Nagato-san," he said thickly. "Shinobi are not supposed to show tears." "That rule," Nagato began, "comes from an old school of thought that would kill all emotion and eschew everything that makes us human. You obey it only at the cost of your soul." Itachi looked at him a little funny, as if he'd said something crazy. Nagato didn't care. What he'd said was true. "Now, we should speak with the Hokage and make sure there are no misunderstandings tonight." Once Itachi had wiped at his face again and replaced his mask, Nagato placed a hand on his shoulder, sending them both across the city with a shunshin. They appeared in the Hokage's office with a whirl of wind. The old man had clearly been expecting them. 2 chairs were set up in front of his desk, and he gestured at them with one wrinkled hand as soon as they arrived. They both sat, even Nagato feeling as if he were about to get scolded. "Explain," he said harshly. They did, with only a few stumbles in the telling as they retold a couple bits and forgot others, having to go back and fill in the gaps. But in the end, they had told the Hokage everything. "So you see, we had no choice. The clan would not have been dissuaded, and Itachi's only other option was this masked man, whom I did not feel was trustworthy." "You clearly did not find me trustworthy either, Nagato-san." The words were deceptively light, and the Rinnegan user hid a wince. Sarutobi was a good leader and a kind man, and it hurt to feel his displeasure. "With respect, Hokage-sama, your hands were tied by politics. We all believed that the clan should not be eliminated by Konoha shinobi, or it would only fuel their resentment. So you, an outsider with no connection to my village, took it upon himself to kill my shinobi." "Actually, I do have a connection," Nagato argued. "I've been raising your Jinchuriki for the past 8 years. I am a citizen of Konoha and therefore I do have an interest in keeping it from plunging into civil war. And you can't say I should have brought it to your attention, it already was. You knew they were plotting a coup and they couldn't be stopped by diplomatic means. It could only be accomplished by force. With Itachi, it is made clear to the rest of the village that not all Uchihas are traitors. And with me, it is made clear to the shinobi that the reincarnation of their god does not condone such actions." A charged silence filled the room after his last sentence. Sarutobi filled his pipe and took a long draw as he thought. It was true that Nagato had a powerful reputation in their world, especially after confirming several incidents during the last war as his work. and once, the elite jonin of the village had requested to test themselves against him. Sarutobi had expected an extensive battle with both sides forced to reveal the depths of their experience and jutsus. Instead, Nagato had summoned 3 other bodies similar to his own, he'd been cagey on the details, and wiped the floor with a jonin, hardly looking winded by the effort. For him to weigh in on a matter automatically drew attention, and many people would side with him for no other reason than he was the master of the Rinnegan. For him to go so far as to fight on behalf of someone would draw much approval. It did send, unequivocally, the message that betraying your own village was unacceptable. Itachi. You are hereby suspended from Anbu service without pay for a period of 1 month. In that time, you are to report weekly on the state of the clan and how they are reacting to today's events. The young Anbu captain nodded acceptingly. Nagato. You will be subject to an investigation, both into your own affairs and your raising of Naruto Uzumaki. While I accept that your actions today were necessary, I will not have the village's only Jinchuriki thinking it is acceptable to disregard rules and do as he pleases. Both he and Nagato ignored the fact that Naruto was already a troublemaker who flouted rules in the classroom. And no one commented on the matter of investigating Nagato's affairs. It was no more than a gesture, designed to show everyone that Nagato was not entirely immune to the law. Konoha was proud to host the god of shinobi, but they wouldn't bow their heads to his every whim. You're both dismissed. Itachi, please speak to your remaining clansmen and explain exactly why this happened. As they left, Sarutobi began writing a speech that he would give in the morning, breaking the news to the village about the clan's betrayal. The mood in the Uchiha compound was somber. Itachi had returned last night, calling the clan together in the central courtyard, just down the street from where the battle had taken place. Smoke was still rising at the time, and the smell of blood and dead bodies accompanied it. Once everyone was there, every single Uchiha who wasn't a ninja, Itachi had calmly explained about the coup, revealing the truth to the children. He had then announced, just as calmly, that the betrayal was inexcusable, and he had acquired the assistance of Nagato, master of the Rinnegan, to execute the clan ninjas. No one had dared say a word as he looked them over with his cold grey eyes. He had finished by saying that the Hokage would make an announcement to the village the following morning and that they were to remain in the compound until then. And the morning had come, and the Anbu had escorted the clan to Konoha Square, directly in front of the Tower of Fire. The truth must have already slipped out, as the Anbu guard was necessary to keep back the screaming villagers trying to harass the Uchihas. Once in the square, the Hokage had strode out. The speech had been less cold than Itachi's declaration, but no less damning. The Hokage had condemned all Uchihas with knowledge of the coup as traitors. The children were spared for their innocence, and the adults for their lack of power. Sarutobi had at least acknowledged that the civilians were likely to have no influence over the ninjas, no matter how many might have argued against the coup. It didn't lessen the hateful glares of the citizens of Konoha. The ninjas had been executed by Itachi, the one loyal Uchiha, and Nagato, master of the Rinnegan. This had brought many cheers from the crowd and lots of smug looks at the Uchihas. That's right, they seemed to say. The god of shinobi killed your family, what are you gonna do about that? And that wasn't the end of it. The clan was stripped of its many privileges until Sarutobi or a successor felt they had redeemed themselves. The clan fortune was greatly reduced, as much of it had been the property of the clan ninjas, and their betrayal gave the village the right to take it away. The walls around the compound would be torn down, and the land once given as a gift by the second Hokage was now once more the property of Konoha, and the Uchihas would have to pay rent to keep living there. The once proud clan had been escorted back to their homes by the Anbu, followed by hateful jeers from the villagers. The walls that might have granted them a reprieve were already being removed by earth jutsu specialists. The Anbu did keep the populace away from the walls during demolition, and the mob wound up going home after a while. Sasuke was now sitting in his room, trying to make sense of what had happened in the span of a day. His brother had killed their parents, maybe personally, the clan was now hated by the rest of the village, and the adults weren't doing anything. No one was arguing about the rights they'd had ripped away, the money that was stolen, or the murders of their family. Why weren't they angry about it? Uncle Tetsu had accompanied him home and told him just to wait, in case something else happened today. He wondered what the adults were talking about. Nagato-san. Shikaku Nara looked surprised as the distinctive man approached them. Hardly ever see you here. The strategist knew better than to ask why he had come to the bar today. Can we get you a drink? Nagato shook his head. I'd rather not be rewarded for what I did, he said, taking a seat. But I would like to forget about it for a while, he added, taking out several large bills and passing them to the barkeep. The man, a retired shinobi with one leg missing, took the money and quickly filled a mug with foaming beer, passing it to Nagato. If it's all the same, many thanks to you, the old man said in a rumbling voice. Nagato acknowledged him by lifting the mug, then drinking quickly. Shikaku, Inoichi, and Choza, who'd all taken a swig at the same time, were surprised to see the god of shinobi chug the entire mug in 10 seconds. He set it down, pushing it back to the barkeep, who'd raised his thick wide eyebrows at the spectacle. Another, please. The Ino-Shikacho trio exchanged significant glances. With the understanding that came from fighting in a warzone together, they agreed on what to do with just a few looks. Slinging one arm around Nagato's shoulders, Inoichi began regaling him with a tale of the last Shinobi World War, while Joseph finished his mug, getting a refill, so he could challenge Nagato to a drinking contest. If Nagato wanted to drown his sorrows and forget how many he'd killed, they would be happy to give him an enjoyable night to remember. You understand why we did it, right? Konan asked. They broke their oath to the village, Naruto said. I don't get why the old man couldn't do anything, but you killed them because they were traitors. Because they would have killed thousands, Konan corrected him gently. It's never totally black and white, and there are times when a small betrayal is necessary. You might have to disobey orders because you learned something your commander didn't know when he gave the orders. You might have to let one friend fight a hopeless battle alone, so you have the time to save 5 others. We don't know why the Uchihas were going to overthrow the village, but we couldn't accept how many they would have killed to do it. And the chaos here could have provoked another war with enemy nations. It would have been a nightmare. That's why we stopped them. Naruto nodded slowly, his young face screwed up in concentration as he thought about it. I think I get it, he finally said. Good. She took a deep breath, bracing herself to tackle the most sensitive topic. What will you say when you see Sasuke again? Itachi waited quietly outside the Hokage's office. The secretary had already informed the Hokage of his arrival, but the man was busy with another visitor. Only the one secretary and a couple orderlies were there, and no one had spoken to him except the secretary when she greeted him. He appreciated the silence. It was better than he deserved. The door opened, interrupting his thoughts, and he forced his face to remain impassive as a large delegation exited the Hokage's office. Right in the middle was the fire daimyo, surrounded by 6 older ninjas and 2 lesser royalty. The lot of them swept past, a few of the shinobi giving Itachi a quick hard look, as if to ensure he wasn't a threat. One nodded to him, a hint of a smile on his lips. No one spoke until they had left the room. The Hokage will see you now, the secretary said. Itachi entered, closing the door behind himself and taking a seat before the Hokage's desk. The old man was busy filling his pipe and taking his time doing it. When he was satisfied, he extended one finger, and a flame popped to life at the tip, which he pressed into the bowl to light it. Taking a long pull, Sarutobi exhaled a cloud of smoke. That was not as bad as I was expecting, he began. But it was not pleasant either. Itachi waited. He doubted Sarutobi expected a reply. You were spoken of quite a bit. Some of the royalty approve of your loyalty, while others question whether you truly have any. That stung a bit, but Itachi refused to let it show. Were you able to assure them that I will not turn against my village? On the whole, yes. But it is, inevitably, a sensitive topic. The best thing would be if you were not highly visible in the next few years, except for good events, to improve your image. You want me to engage in a PR campaign? Itachi translated, barely keeping the disapproval out of his tone. Yes, Sarutobi replied bluntly. Like it or not, you have become far more than just the heir to the Uchiha clan. You are the only Uchiha shinobi at this time, and will remain so for the next 4 years, until your younger brother graduates. According to your father's notes, the Sharingan only shows up in select families within the Uchiha, and it will be at least 8 years before any of those family members come of age, and none are currently in training. There will be resistance to allowing them into the academy at all. I have already used considerable influence just to keep them from throwing Sasuke out. It may well be a decade before any Uchihas save you and your brother are prominent shinobi of the village. You must present a good image or else the clan's decline will only accelerate and their reputation will become irrevocably ruined. It was certainly a bitter thought. Granted, there were ideologies and practices within the family that should be lost, but the family itself, his young relatives, weren't at fault. And he had been raised knowing the responsibility of the clan would fall on his shoulders one day. It had just come earlier than expected. I understand, he said. It wasn't like he could start complaining now, after everything he'd done. Jiraiya faded into visibility once Itachi had left the room. Pretty sure he's loyal to you, old man, the sage said, taking the now vacant seat. You're certain? Sarutobi asked softly. Given that he stabbed both his parents through the heart in favor of betraying you, yes, Jiraiya stated sharply. He knew his mentor hated having to distrust his people like this, but Orochimaru had taught them that anyone could be hiding something nasty. Itachi went far above and beyond the call of duty here, and it wasn't a spur-of-the-moment action that he'll regret later. He went about this for weeks and still followed through. Barring anything unforeseen, I'd say he's loyal. Sarutobi nodded slowly. Good. He has promise, and I would hate to see him crumble from this. Promise? Jiraiya prompted. It wasn't often anymore that the old man said that. He has the skills to be a good leader, not just a good ninja. I plan to have him teaching in a few years. Jiraiya had a shrewd idea that he knew exactly how many years it would be before Itachi became a Jonin instructor, but he didn't say it. And like I said, he needs to present a good image in order to restore the clan's image. You have something specific in mind. Sarutobi merely smiled. Tell me, Jiraiya, what is the highest possible honor a shinobi can have in this village? Jiraiya thought for a second, recognizing his mentor's tone when asking a trick question. Well, there's the position of Anbu head, he mused. But that's not the kind of thing that would garner attention and public approval. After all, even he had to search to discover the Anbu head's true identity. The only other thing I can think of is to be put on the memorial stone, he admitted. You're not talking about sending him on a suicide mission, are you? Well, some do have a rather low opinion of the title, Sarutobi chuckled. Though you're on the right track. Jiraiya turned the two statements over in his mind several times, trying to understand. A suicide mission was on the right track, but not exactly right. Or was he talking about the memorial stone? But what was similar to the memorial stone? He tried picturing the granite slab, with the names of the 3 deceased Hokages at the top, above the names of the other ninjas to give their lives. His train of thought was wrenched free as he understood what Sarutobi was implying. You're not, he gasped. Not for at least a decade, Sarutobi said. He's still young, barely a teenager. But one day, if he proves himself until then he trailed off with a shrug. He has the potential. That's a lot of potential you're talking about. Which is why we won't speak of it again for some time, the Hokage said firmly. Got it. Jiraiya took a breath, pushing the information to the back of his mind. So, what else do we need to discuss? Orochimaru. Have you any new information? No. I located an abandoned research facility 3 months ago, but that's it. He quit using it at least 5 months before I found it. The snake's gotten real good at hiding. Stay alert. You may have any resources you need. At present, Orochimaru is the greatest possible threat to us. Sasuke wasn't sure if he was glad or not that Uncle Tetsu had kept a hand firmly clasped on his shoulder, holding him back. They'd left their land for the first time in 5 days, and mere steps outside the compound, they were accosted by a pair of civilians. The Anbu had arrested some people who'd actually attacked Uchihas 2 days earlier, so people weren't likely to repeat that mistake, but no one stopped them from yelling insults, throwing old fruits, and sneering at the 2 Uchihas. Uncle Tetsu had kept a firm grip on him, walking along head held high and acting as if he couldn't hear what the people were saying. Sasuke wanted to yell back at them or throw something, but Uncle had warned him before leaving that Sasuke wasn't to make a peep until they got back home. So he had walked alongside his uncle, the fire in his belly growing hotter and fiercer with every insult and ripe tomato hurled their way. Their business had been mercifully quick. Uncle Tetsu had gone to the bank first to make his first payment on the rent for their house, ignoring the cold glares of everyone around them, including the bank teller, and then they'd gone to a merchant Tetsu had known for decades. The man was cool with them, but not rude, and he didn't charge Tetsu 1 cent more than he normally did for the blacksmith's typical purchase of high-quality steel. They left with the man's promise that the steel would be delivered by the end of the day, and headed home. Once out of the brief sanctuary of the merchant's warehouse, they were again subjected to the hatred of the villagers. By the time they made it home, every piece of clothing was stained, and the fire in Sasuke's belly felt more like a volcano, ready to erupt at any second. The moment Uncle closed the door behind them, Sasuke twisted out of his grip, whirling on the older man. Why did you take me out there? Why didn't you say something to them? How can they do that? Why hasn't someone done something yet? I took you out to show you what it will be like in a month's time, his uncle said impassively. When you return to the academy and must face them every day. The words were probably meant to knock Sasuke down, but it just made him angrier. He imagined what it would be like to see Naruto, who was raised by his parents' killer. What would the fox brat say? I always said I was better than you, Sasuke.now everyone knows I was right. Why should I? I don't want to go anywhere near those people. Then they'll sneer at you even more. They don't know me. Sasuke bellowed. And they don't care. The clan cares. Why haven't we done something about this? He screamed, his young voice becoming more high-pitched as his desperate plea burst forth. Because we can't do anything. Uncle Tetsu curled his hands into fists, the knuckles popping as they whitened. Sasuke abruptly realized that his uncle was also furious, just better at hiding it. Because the whole village is against us. Boast no one will listen to any of us. Neither one said that the village would listen to Itachi, but Sasuke was certain both of them were thinking it. The thought of his brother made his fury burn white hot for a moment. Itachi had killed their parents. Itachi had killed everyone. It was all his fault, if it wasn't for him they'd all be alive now. How can you just take it like that? Sasuke asked, not yelling, but still letting his anger show in his tone. How can you hear what they say and act like it's nothing? Decades of smithing have taught me patience and control, the man answered. But do not believe for a moment that I do not care about my family. Again, no one mentioned Itachi. Konan sighed, closing the door as Shikaku left. Following Nagato into the living room, she found him collapsed on the couch. It was, of course, Nagato's diva path pain, but the strong connection it had to Nagato's real body allowed him to get drunk through it, and the effects were equally clear through his false body. The real Nagato was probably struggling not to pass out. "I don't blame you," she said softly, pulling him up off the couch and half dragging him down the hall. He went along happily, an uncharacteristically bright smile on his face. "But you should be glad that Naruto didn't see this." With the boy's enthusiasm and complete inability to keep secrets, the whole village would have heard by tomorrow. She had hopes that Shikaku and his friends would be discreet about the matter. "I feel better," Nagato said sleepily as she deposited him in his bed. "You didn't need beer for that," she said. "Just sleep it off. We'll talk in the morning." Watching over the clan he'd come to despise, a one-eyed man kept silent vigil throughout the night. Itachi thought he'd been clever, leaving the family alive. But the curse of hatred was strong and had ample opportunity to make itself known. With a push here or there, the right hypnotically induced dream, it would be a simple matter to make that hatred spill over into violence. Or he could let it fester for years and become far more potent. Either way, he would win in the end. Slipping into a house unseen, he began his work. Jiraiya glanced back at the village as the sun peeked over the horizon. He could have stayed, it would make sense to get some more intel on the state of the village after the purge, but that meant letting Orochimaru's trail grow even colder. He'd already lost 3 days over this, he had to be back out there at once. Making up his mind, he set out on the road. Watching the almighty Pain, god of shinobi, stumble into the kitchen, holding his head in one hand while keeping his eyes closed against the lights was terribly amusing. Konan put a glass of water in his hand, smiling as he downed the whole thing in seconds. Replacing it with another one, she gently pushed him into the living room, where he navigated to the chair by memory and fell into it. Or he tried to. She'd moved the furniture in the night, and Pain wound up sprawled on the floor, spilling his water on himself. "Was I that bad?" he had. "Yes, and I won't have this chance again for another 10 years, she said, pulling him to his feet and guiding him to the chair. He sat more cautiously this time, relaxing when it turned out nothing was wrong. She switched off the lights, letting him open his eyes wearily. "The other night was horrible," he muttered. "I wanted to forget." "There are better things to take your mind off of horrors," she said. "You know that. What's your point? That the next time I help massacre a ninja clan, I shouldn't get astoundingly drunk the next night. I'll remember it." She didn't let the venom in his voice get to her. It was directed at himself, anyway. "Why are you so angry? We all agreed it had to be done." "Of course it had to be done," he snapped. "This world is cursed, Konan. The killing, the betrayal, the deceit, the rot. It's never-ending and inescapable. The only way to be truly good is to kill those who are worse than you." His tone and sudden yelling took her aback, but not the words themselves. He'd been saying something like that for years. "We've been happy here, Nagato," she reminded him. "Some of them are still afraid, but under it they're good people." "I know," he said. "That's why I got too relaxed. I've become complacent. Jiraiya-sensei expected me to save the world when we were young, and I've been content just to watch the world pass me by. Raising a Jinchuriki is good. It's necessary." "Of course it is," he said calmly. "I'd never deny that. But it's not the only thing I can do. I'm not limited to working in one place at a time." "And what would you do with the other paths?" she asked. "Form a mercenary group. Kill everyone evil. Rule the world through fear and violence." Nagato didn't speak. Standing up, he walked away silently, closing his door sharply behind himself. The Uchiha clan woke up slowly that day, and many began with a worse mood than the day before. The usual business, for those who still had jobs, was postponed as everyone gathered in the courtyard without even meaning to. Parents, children, grandparents, brothers and sisters in no time, the entire clan was there, talking amongst themselves as they milled about. Naturally, the conversations quickly turned to the recent massacre. Most were angry, some resigned, but all agreed that the Hokage had gone too far in stripping the clan of its dignity. Without the ninjas and without their fortune, how could they survive? Their land had been owned by the family for generations, why should they start paying rent for it? Why had they torn down the wall and exposed the Uchihas to the village's hatred? Why was the Hokage trying to destroy the clan so utterly? With their history, their prestige, any village would be honored to have the Uchiha clan, and here Konoha was throwing them away. It was wrong, and spoke of nothing but the Hokage's age and foolishness. "He should have retired years ago," Tetsu rumbled. "Let someone younger take the reins. Only an old fool could think this was acceptable." "Yeah." One of Sasuke's distant cousins agreed. "We don't deserve this. We're the Uchihas. The fire daimyo himself dined with us. The best clan in Konoha." Shouldn't be reduced to peasants like this. I have 4 kids to feed. Yeah. The Hokage ought to give us our money back, it belongs to us. Our ancestors passed it down, he stole it from us. Sasuke was about to chime in when the crowd suddenly went silent. Heads began turning, and it took him a moment to realize that everyone was looking in the same direction. Turning that way, he looked up at the clan dining hall to see Itachi crouching over the door and Anbu mask pulled to one side so they could see his expressionless face. You should be careful what you say, Sasuke's brother said coolly. It could sound very much like treason. Hopping down from the roof, he began casually walking away, leaving the crowd silent behind him. Until one of Uncle Tetsu's cousins spoke out, breaking away from the crowd to take several steps in Itachi's direction. Then go ahead and report us, you murderer. That's your job, isn't it? Itachi came to a dead stop in the middle of the road. The older man looked emboldened by this, looking encouragingly back at the crowd. You can't act so high and mighty with us, Itachi. You killed your own family just to look good to the Hokage, didn't you? And if they told you to kill all of us, you wouldn't even blink, would you? You goddamned monster. The movement was so fast, nobody there caught it. All they knew was that 1 second, Kazu was yelling at Itachi, and the next Itachi had hoisted him off the ground by his collar, his perpetually calm face twisted up with rage. What the hell do you know? He bellowed, shocking all the crowd into taking a step back. You talk about how great this clan is when they were going to murder hundreds for nothing but their own damn pride. He threw Kazu to the ground, sending the civilian Uchiha tumbling back towards the crowd, who rapidly backed away from him. Itachi stomped forward, sending Kazu scuttling backward in fright. My father would have killed the Hokage. My mother would have helped him do it. His Sharingan flared to life, bright red eyes clearly visible in the sunlight. And they wouldn't have stopped there. They would have murdered every single innocent person who stood in their way, and all of you knew that. His face was turning red, and spittle was flying from his lips. 119 Uchiha civilians who knew the truth, and not one of you had the balls to say something. All of you are ink traitors. Every last one of you. His chakra became visible as a blue glow around his body, a hot energy that warmed their skin, just enough to let them know he could as easily burn them as scream at them. Don't you dare speak of what you're owed. The only thing Konoha owes a pack of traitors is an unmarked grave. Itachi wheeled around, storming away. He paused at the crossroads, just long enough for a parting shot. If you'll excuse me, I'm going to try and redeem our family's name. Maybe you can quit humiliating us long enough for it to work. Then he vanished. The crowd was deathly silent. Iruka exchanged a worried glance with Hade. The Jonin had been posted at the academy in anticipation of a very tense semester. The Uchiha purge had taken place 2 months ago, but the villagers' attitude towards the clan hadn't changed much. Today was the first day of classes, and no one knew just how difficult it would be with Sasuke. Personally, Iruka felt sympathy for his student, but he didn't know how to keep the other students from hating him. The Hokage had placed hate here to stop potential fights from breaking out. There was only 2 minutes until the bell was due to ring, and most of the students were milling about the courtyard, chatting with old friends and delaying going in. Sasuke still hadn't shown up, and Iruka wondered if he might actually be planning to skip the first day. For a moment, he didn't recognize the boy who walked into the courtyard 1 minute before the bell rang. Then he realized the multicolored shirt was supposed to be solid black, and the hair was laying flat because someone had dumped water all over the boy. Still, the obvious abuse suffered from the villagers didn't change Sasuke's straight-backed stance or his determined eyes. Iruka was at once proud of his student and dismayed at what had been done. His appearance didn't go unnoticed by the other students either. Sasuke didn't even make it halfway across the courtyard before a trio of older boys stepped in his way. The crowd quickly gave them space, leaving a large circle for them to fight in as everyone watched. Iruka rushed to the door, hoping he could stop them before it got out of hand. While he couldn't hear the bullies, he could guess what they were saying to Sasuke. His frantic rush to the fight was halted as he saw someone else stepping into the ring. The bright blonde hair and blue eyes were unmistakable, and his heart fell as he saw Naruto walk toward Sasuke. Then the boy turned around, putting his back to Sasuke and facing the older students with a grim expression. Cut it out. Sasuke's not a traitor. What the hell did you say, you little freak? One of the bullies said. You on the traitor's side now? Maybe the fox isn't as gone as we thought it was. A vicious kick to the back of that bully's knee toppled him. Sakura followed it up with a textbook perfect throat punch that left him gasping for breath before she simply slammed her knee into his jaw. His teeth smashed together with a loud crack and he collapsed. As his friends moved toward Sakura, she was joined by Kiba, Choji, Shikamaru, Shino, and Hinata. Looking between their fallen friend, Naruto and Sasuke and Naruto's friends, the remaining bullies were hesitating to continue. That's enough, break it up. Iruka called out, finally making his presence known to the students. The bell began ringing and they all rushed to make it into the building on time. Haruka caught the two bullies who tried to run. "Take your friend to the nurse's station and come to my office after school," he ordered them, letting some of his anger show. They both nodded frantically, grabbing their friend and hurrying away. Naruto, his friends, and Sasuke had stayed behind. "Get inside," Haruka told them all. "You shouldn't be late on your first day." Most of them hurried in, but Naruto trailed behind, walking alongside Sasuke at the fruit-stained boy's pace. The blonde boy gestured for the others to go ahead as they glanced back at him, and Haruka noted how quickly they obeyed him. The boy would become a leader one day, that much was obvious. But what kind? He strained his ears to hear what they might say to one another once indoors. "Why did you do that?" Sasuke demanded. "You're not a traitor," Naruto answered easily. "You didn't know about the plot. It's not your fault." There was a long silence as they walked up the stairs. "I know. But no one else thinks so. They're all idiots." Haruka was startled to hear a dry chuckle come from Sasuke. There was a longer silence, lasting until the classroom was in sight. Then, as if wanting to spit it out while they still had some privacy, the word spilled out of Sasuke's mouth. "It was my parents' fault. They destroyed the clan." "You're not your parents," Naruto said quietly, putting a hand on Sasuke's shoulder. The two boys entered the classroom side by side, taking the seats Hinata had held for them. Both of them were thinking the future had become a little brighter. Konan just stared at Nagato, mouth opening and closing several times as she desperately tried to find the words. At last, they popped out. "You're insane." "Possibly," he shrugged. "But this whole world is mad, Konan. Why shouldn't this work? An organization of criminals operating in the shadows to prevent wars and lessen hostilities between the hidden villages. I don't know why in the world anyone would think that's a bad idea." She shook her head in disbelief. "What would you even call a group like that?" "I rather like the name Akatsuki." 11 years after Kyuubi attack. Sasuke stepped back after throwing his kunai and shuriken perfectly into the targets, each one a bullseye. Most of the class applauded politely. Naruto and Kiba clapped Sasuke on the back as he rejoined them, and Ino congratulated him, her cheeks turning pink as he gave her a tiny, grateful smile in return. "Next up, Uzumaki Naruto," Haruka announced. The couple students cheered just seeing Naruto walk up to the throwing position, tossing a kunai casually end over end as he went. Not waiting for a signal, he began throwing the moment he was there. His movements weren't only textbook precise, every one flowed into the next, making a continuous motion with no hesitation as he flung a dozen kunai and twice as many shuriken, the metal whistling keenly through the air until each and every one impacted a target, burying the pointy ends into the bull's eyes. The crowd erupted in cheers as Naruto rejoined the group, grinning shamelessly and accepting the congratulations from his close friends. "Way to go," Sasuke said as they watched Ino getting called up. "Yours too," Naruto replied. "We both know you're better," the Uchiha replied casually. "Only because you don't train with me and Uncle Nagato." Sasuke shrugged. "He's got different eyes, he doesn't know how to train someone with Sharingan." "I got no eyes," Naruto pointed out. "He still trains me fine." "I'm doing good enough with my clan," Sasuke said, his tone firm. It wasn't the first time they'd had this conversation. It wouldn't be the last. They both applauded as Ino walked back to their group. Sasuke patted her on the shoulder, smiling a little as he said, "Well done," which left Ino pink in the face again and saying thank you without quite meeting his eyes. Naruto, smirking, stepped away from the two of them, going to talk with Hinata. "Well done, everyone," Haruka told the class. "Now, our final test for the day is," he broke off as a crackle of static from the school's intercom emerged. Everyone looked up at the speaker perched above the door. "Attention, Yumino Haruka," a static Y voice they recognized as the superintendent said. "Please report to the Hokage immediately." A static crackling cut out as Haruka turned back to the class. "Change of plans. Go wait in the classroom. I'll send someone to proctor the test for you." He headed off as the students filed inside. Sasuke looked around, noticing that he didn't see Naruto's distinctive hair in the crowd. Searching for Hinata, he made his way over to the dark-haired girl, bending down to whisper in her ear. "So, what's your boyfriend up to?" She blushed, giving him a little glare with her lavender pupil-less eyes. "He's not my boyfriend," she hissed. "Not yet," he said. "So what's he doing?" She bit her lip to keep from smiling, glancing down at the floor. "You'll see," she said after a moment before slipping away from him in the crowd. As they all filed into the classroom, Sasuke felt a nudge from behind. Turning, he saw Naruto coming in just behind him. "Where have you?" "Nowhere," Naruto said, beaming at his friend. "You and your girlfriend cannot keep a secret." "She's not my girlfriend," Naruto hissed, blue eyes darting around to make sure she wasn't nearby. "Not yet. What's happening?" "Nothing," Naruto answered brightly. "Nothing at all." Let me rephrase that, Sasuke said, his voice straining to stay calm and collected. What have you already done? They had nearly reached their seats. Glancing around once more, Naruto leaned in close, cupping a hand over his mouth so only Sasuke could hear. The Uchiha felt his eyes widen as a soft crackle of static came from his friend's mouth. His mouth opened, but before he could get his thoughts in order well enough to say anything, Naruto had skipped around him, pulling a startled Hinata one seat over and sitting down on her far side, leaving the girl between him and Sasuke. Sitting down, Sasuke tried to understand what had just happened. If he wasn't crazy, Naruto had somehow faked an announcement that caused Iruka to leave. Why? What good did that to them? They still had to take the test, and while it was funny to imagine the teacher rushing to the Tower of Fire, only to learn there was no call, that wasn't exactly Naruto's style. He preferred pranks where he could see the victim's loss of face. He was still mulling it over 15 minutes later when a clearly annoyed Iruka entered the room, yanked a stack of test booklets out of the desk, and begun distributing them. Opening the booklet, Sasuke picked up a pencil, looking at the first question. It was already filled out. In Sasuke's own, neat penmanship no less. Turning the page, he saw it was just the same, all the work shown and indistinguishable from Sasuke's own. Flipping through rapidly, he saw that all of the questions were filled out in his handwriting. Even the way the essay questions were answered sounded like him. One look around the room showed that everyone else was in the same situation. Some had good poker faces as they slowly went through the test, while others were gaping in open astonishment. Glancing at Naruto and Hinata, he saw the two of them clearly fighting down laughter, both doing their absolute best not to look at one another. He caught Hinata's eye, raising one eyebrow, and the girl bit down on her lip, body shaking slightly with suppressed giggles. Well, hats off to them. Distract Iruka, get him worked up, and he doesn't notice that the tests were meddled with. Speaking of which, the teacher was too busy writing something down on a notepad to notice the confusion amongst his students. Still, thinking of what it might take to mess with the tests like this, never mind getting them each handed out to the right person, was blowing his mind. He returned to his test. All the questions may have been answered, but he didn't trust Naruto to not mess with his classmates by slipping in wrong answers just to laugh at them for taking it at face value. He loved pulling the rug out from under people. All of them? The Hokage asked, puffing on his pipe. All of them? Iruka erupted. Every test was answered perfectly. We have perfect scores for every student. Sarutobi folded his gnarled hands in front of himself, resting them on the desk as he took another puff of his pipe. I hardly see why you are complaining, Iruka. You have clearly accomplished great things with this class. The teacher's level glare told the Hokage he wasn't amused by the little joke. Taking his pipe and tapping out the ashes, he gestured at the chair. Iruka sat down. Sir, we both know who must be behind this. Indeed we do. Naruto has shown today that his skills could outclass even a majority of our Chunin. Quite the accomplishment for an 11-year-old. But what he did was wrong, and he should be punished. Glancing out the window, Sarutobi saw a white butterfly flutter off the windowsill. Smiling, he turned back to Iruka. That will be handled. But first, a question. How is it you did not notice this until grading the tests? Iruka scowled. I was distracted, Hokage-sama. I had already fallen for a trick of his that sent me racing here, then I raced back when I realized the truth. I didn't check the tests, and I wasn't paying attention to the class because I was writing orders for the staff to figure out how Naruto hacked the intercom. He did not hack it, I suspect. Iruka frowned, more curious now than angry. What? We have already known for years that Naruto is quite skilled and clever. While much can be attributed to his parental figures, there are a certain one or two traits which come from elsewhere. The fox, you mean? Iruka was no fool. He held Naruto no animosity for containing the Kyuubi, but he also had always wondered what the effects might be. Both the Hokage and Nagato himself had assured Iruka that there was nothing to worry about in that regard. Indeed. You see, Nagato had begun teaching the boy a full year before entering him in the academy. When Naruto joined, he could already perform both the substitution and transformation techniques. That's impressive, Iruka said, not seeing where the Hokage was going with this. When he was 6 years old, Nagato-san came to me with a very interesting tale. It seems they had bought a large container of Naruto's favorite sugar cookies, intending them to be doled out as rewards to the boy if he did well in school. He paused, puffing on his pipe for a moment. They came home to find the cookie jar still on the top shelf, but entirely empty, and Naruto was feeling quite sick. He smiled a little. It seems that, what happened was, Naruto had used the transformation technique to assume Nagato-san's form in order to reach the cookie jar. He waited, watching Iruka's expression go from confused to startled to more confused to shocked and horrified. He did what? Iruka finally gasped. That was my general reaction as well. The transformation technique is an illusion. It can't make you taller. What he did is impossible. I quite agree. Nagato-san himself was taken aback by this revelation, as even he cannot use the transformation technique in that manner. Which led both he and I to conclude that this was a result of the Kyuubi. He can actually transform. Take on any shape. Nagato-san has done subtle tests with him since then and confirms that Naruto can assume even the form of inanimate objects and can take a form as big as an elephant or as small as a mouse. He seems to have a limitation in that he cannot manipulate a body without bones, leaving animals like Octopi beyond him. However, even without eyes, he can hear his surroundings, and both Nagato and I expect he could train his chakra senses and they would function in any state. This is unbelievable, Iruka gasped. The possibility-ish trailed off, unable to give voice even to the few ideas that had already come to mind. Which is why Naruto has no idea. Nagato focused his training efforts on other techniques, proclaiming that Naruto has mastered the transformation technique and therefore should not worry about it. No one else, so far as I know, is aware. But once he becomes a shinobi, he'll be informed. I have left that up to Nagato-san's discretion and he will of course discuss the matter with Naruto's future sensei. Iruka groaned as he realized now what had happened. So he altered his voice to make the false announcement. Indeed. And I suspect he shapeshifted into each of his classmates to help write in exactly their handwriting. Possibly his friend Hinata aided him in getting samples of their handwriting to mimic. So she knows, then, about his transformation. I will have Nagato-san speak with her about it. But how did he infiltrate my office, steal the tests, and fill them all out without me noticing? They were locked up and I have seals on that safe. I will admit defeat there. It is a shame that his personality will draw him to fighting on the front lines. He could become the most amazing espionage agent in our village's history. He smiled. I am actually more interested in how he ensured each test went to the right student. The sudden commotion outside the door was all the warning they got before it was thrown open. The Hokage's masterclass security seals peeled away with all the defensive properties of rice paper walls as Nagato strode into the room, carrying Naruto with him. The boy was struggling, but also grinning delightedly. Ah, Nagato-san, Naruto-kun, Sarutobi greeted them, lighting his pipe. What excellent timing. You know what he did? Nagato asked, voice full of exasperation, simultaneously twitching a couple fingers in the direction of the door, repairing the security seals. Essentially, though some filling in of the details would help. Exactly what did he and young Hinata get up to today? It wasn't Hinata, it was all me. Naruto interjected quickly. Yes, and what did you do? Iruka asked. He honestly didn't care that Naruto was taking the blame for Hinata, he was the instigator after all. And the girl would be properly disciplined by her father. The three adults spent the next 15 minutes grilling Naruto and getting answers on exactly how he had spied on Iruka to find the tests, lies, since they knew Hinata's Byakugan must have been responsible, how he had snuck through the security seals around the school, half a lie, since it was probably, again, her Byakugan that showed him the way through the net. Dismantled the wall behind Iruka's wall safe so he could open it up from the rear, not a lie, and a revelation that left Iruka with his head in his hands as he saw how he'd been tricked, stolen old tests to see his classmates' handwriting, probably not a lie, and then spent 2 nights working hard to answer the tests and copy their handwriting and voice so it would look authentic, not a lie. And a revelation that made Nagato privately swear against letting Naruto stay the night with Sasuke and Itachi ever again before returning the fixed tests to the wall safe the night before the end of semester exam. He also explained that Iruka always delivered any kind of assignment in the same pattern and he'd memorized who sat in which seats. All three adults shared looks at the end of this pride-filled confession. You're grounded until school starts up again, Nagato declared. And you're serving a month's detention when school resumes, Iruka added. And 1 month suspension without pay, Sarutobi added dryly. Everyone turned to look at him funny. He gave them all a wry smile. I've been tallying up Naruto's time off without pay for all his major incidents since he started at the academy. It's currently just under 1 year. Wait, what? Naruto exclaimed, horrified. That sounds quite fitting, Hokage-sama, Iruka said, smiling. I quite agree, Nagato said, mirroring Iruka's smile. Until next time. He walked away, Naruto in tow, the security seals opening and repairing for him with hardly a glance, while Naruto cried out, but I want to go on adventures as a ninja. I have no doubt he will one day strike fear into the hearts of all our enemies, Sarutobi said dryly. The sad thing is, I agree, Iruka admitted. Well, Itachi thinks it was funny, Sasuke confided. Naruto did not look cheered up by this. Sasuke couldn't help smirking as he admired the large origami cage Konan had created to put Naruto in while they weren't at home. I didn't think it would turn out like this. Oh, you're only in the cage for a few hours. Of course, the pictures he took earlier, when Naruto wasn't looking, would provide blackmail material for years. Yeah, I know. He sighed, stretching to get some feeling back in his legs. He wanted me to ask, by the way, how did you do that with your voice? Sasuke asked. Itachi says changing your voice would be a gamakenjing technique for the Anbu. Oh, I adapted the transformation technique, Naruto said. You just focus chakra in your vocal cords, and it's so internalized it's almost impossible for anyone to sense that it's a technique at all. I can even throw my voice. So it sounds like I'm somewhere else. Itachi's voice came from behind Sasuke, who instinctively turned around. That's pretty neat, he admitted, turning back to Naruto. I didn't think transformation could do something like that, though. Well, this is what I did first. Naruto spent the next 2 hours teaching Sasuke as much as he could of the technique, but it was clear to both of them that it was slow going. Nagato and Konan arrived then, and Sasuke made up an excuse to leave, but not before telling Naruto that he'd keep practicing. So you see why this is so important, Konan finished. Hinata, wide-eyed, nodded rapidly. I knew there was something different with Naruto-kun's transformation, she said. But I didn't think wow, was all she could say. She couldn't bring herself to admit that she'd been wondering if she was doing the technique wrong after witnessing everything Naruto could do with it. Naruto's always been a special boy. Konan smiled fondly. Even though the ability was given to him by luck, he's made it his own skill through practice and creativity. He really is amazing, Hinata murmured. Konan gave the young girl a knowing look. Well, I'm glad to see someone truly appreciating my nephew. There isn't anything between you two that I should know about, is there? She teased gently. Hinata promptly went red as a tomato. The last year or so of Sasuke casually calling Naruto her boyfriend had desensitized her to it, and his constant addition of not yet every time she denied it was just annoying. But to hear the suggestion from Konan, Naruto's aunt, practically his mother, and one of the kindest ladies she'd ever known well, Hinata wasn't ready for that just yet. Konan put one arm around the girl who she was sitting next to, drawing her closer. It's not a problem, she said kindly. I know it's a little early for that. When Hinata turned less red but was still nervously avoiding Konan's gaze, the woman added, of course, I also know when my nephew's getting certain looks. I don't see anything wrong with your affections for him, Hinata, you know we're close to your family. To her surprise, that actually made Hinata frown a little, just a small crease line between her eyes. I mean she didn't seem able to work out her thoughts. Konan let her think it through, rubbing her shoulder comfortingly. I love him, Hinata blurted out, her face turning tomato red again as she looked away from Konan. That made the rogue ninja pause. Of course, her immediate reaction was a simple dismissal. Hinata was 11, she easily had a decade to go before really understanding the differences between affection, lust, and real love. Then her brain caught up. Hinata was a Hyuga and a powerful carrier of the bloodline, given her status as clan heiress. While it wasn't an easily broached subject, she had the impression that the girl would have learned the facts of life some years ago, given she'd have seen family members in private. A head start into understanding that most people just wanted each other's bodies, and the ability to spy on intimate meetings and see how they interacted when it was love versus lust would make Hinata more mature in this area. And again, 11 was still 11. She might know love from lust by watching others, but this was her first time experiencing either one for herself. On the other hand, she couldn't exactly say that to the girl. You're both young, she began, speaking slowly as she worked out what to say. I've seen that you're close, he trusts you more than anyone else, but it's still too early for either one of you. Seeing Hinata opening her mouth to protest, Konan quickly cut her off. Give it a few years. You'll both change once you're officially shinobi, you shouldn't be dating until after that. She got to her feet, patting Hinata on the shoulder. I need to leave. You won't forget to keep the secret, right? I won't forget, Hinata said, not looking at her again. Alright. Have a good night. She left the room, nodding farewell to the Hyuga she passed on her way out. Her outward appearance was perfect, although her mind was in turmoil. She wouldn't have guessed that her teasing would trigger something like that. The bar they were meeting in was cheap, dirty, and full of mercenaries desperate for a quick buck. Meaning it was ideal for a circumspect meeting. Waiting at one table against a wall, near a window, and not where he'd said he'd be waiting was a stranger wearing a scruffy coat and a worn straw hat. The only thing to mark him was the red inner lining of his coat. The man he'd come to meet was no more obvious, in spite of his near 6 feet in height. His physique and brutish looks, combined with a sword on his back, marked him as just another mercenary. A few of the mercs already there looked at him apprehensively, sensing competition, but they were appeased as he made a beeline for the first stranger. The big man already had a job. The first man took note of the blue lining on the inside of the large man's traveling cloak. Pleased to meet you in person, he said, lowering his head in a respectful nod. The gesture was returned by the big man. You are, I assume, Kisame Hoshigaki. I've never seen someone with such massive chakra reserves, nor in possession of a weapon with chakra of its own. That last statement got a raised eyebrow from the big man. Well, I guess the rumors are true. My man said you were something special. The first man raised his straw hat just enough to reveal his eyes. Kisim's own widened slightly in surprise, but he quickly controlled himself as the eyes were concealed again. So, what's the job? Pain smiled, letting it be obvious enough for Kisim to see it. If you've come for a mere job, you ought to walk right now. My time is too valuable for such a small thing. He had to admit, it was a little fun to get away from Konan, Naruto, and Konoha and assume the role of the all-powerful, mysterious, and visionary wielder of the Rinnegan. He enjoyed his life down south, but it could get dull, and it was terribly freeing to flaunt his power and reputation and use it to tweak the noses of such dangerous people. So, it really is employment, huh? For how long? Indefinitely. That clearly gave Kisim pause. Pay? Considerable. Spend 6 months in my organization and even you won't have to worry about money for a few years. The suggestion that he knew about Kisim's spending habits had obviously rocked the man again. The work? Your favorite? Disposal. That got a more favorable grin. And the goals? Payne leaned forward, folding his hands and resting his elbows on the table. Peace. Elimination of war elements and control of extreme threats. He smirked at the confusion evident in Kisim's chakra. The man was too skilled to let it show on his face. An effort which will make a multitude of enemies. Enemies which must be eliminated. Now the grin was not only returning, but growing bigger. He asked one last question, the same one every possible recruit asked. When can I leave? When you're tired of working with us. Kisim reached across the table decisively, and Pain shook his hand. I'm in. Welcome to Akatsuki. Leaving the bar to make his way to his actual hotel, Pain considered the newest recruit. He likely thought they were hiding a hidden agenda under the statement of peace. The shark man believed they were working toward something far more sinister. Hopefully, spending months or years working with them and furthering peace and security would convince him that the goal was worthwhile once he realized it wasn't a lie. And if not, well, Pain would assassinate him once he left the organization. While that Pain returned to the hotel room, the Diva Path Pain opened a heavily sealed black notebook, recording the new recruit in it. That made 2 members of the inner circle of Akatsuki. The spies and informants he'd recruited had intel on 2 more potential recruits. The next day, he would begin the lengthy process of approaching Kakuzu of Takigakure. Supposedly, this one would respond best to promises of wealth rather than of combat. Several months later, Nagato found himself once more busy with his Konoha life. Naruto's 6th year in the academy had ended and he had come top of the class again, with Sasuke and Hinata just barely trailing behind. The 2 clan heirs, though Sasuke's status was only words now, had evidently been receiving training from their family in the last 2 years, as their styles were growing visibly different from the basic forms taught at the academy. Nagato suspected, given that Itachi was frequently on Anbu missions, that Sasuke had somehow awakened his Sharingan and was learning new moves in the few days Itachi was available, then polishing and mastering the techniques on his own. While his knowledge of the Sharingan said that it required great personal trauma to awaken, he could think of few things worse than losing his parents and having all his illusions of the world around him shattered overnight. Regardless, they were having a celebratory party for all of Naruto's friends. He had only just finished setting out the last of the decorations according to Konan's specifications. He never understood why she wouldn't let him summon a few more pains to help decorate quicker when the doorbell rang and Naruto eagerly welcomed Kiba. The Inyazuka was always one to enjoy a party and it hardly took a minute for them to be engaged in a blindfolded shuriken throwing challenge. The rest of the guests turned up over the next half hour and soon Nagato was drinking punch while discreetly keeping an eye on them. Ino was chatting with Sasuke, her usual self-confidence a little shaken as always around him. Nagato was aware that the Yamanakas didn't have any animosity against Sasuke himself, but he was equally aware that they wouldn't approve of their daughter dating him. Ino obviously knew how unhappy they would be, but she hadn't lost her interest in him. Sasuke, well confident enough to ignore the sneers many villagers still sent his way, wasn't oblivious to his standing and seemed determined to keep almost everyone at arm's length. Naruto, and by extension Hinata, was the only exception. Nagato had barely thought of the Hyuga heiress before he noticed her slyly guiding Naruto through the crowd and towards an unoccupied guest bedroom. He was fairly certain she was too young for the first thought that popped into his head, but her desire for privacy was still clear to see. Hiding both a sigh of exasperation and a happy little smile, he cast an eye about for Konan, striding in his old friend's direction. He could keep her occupied for a few minutes, long enough to make sure she didn't notice the children's absence. He'd done it often enough as a kid, though ironically he'd been giving Konan herself private time with Yahiko by distracting Jiraiya. Earlier that evening, Hinata had been fighting down butterflies in her stomach. Now, she felt a heavy pit of fear in her gut, weighing her down. She'd caught a glimpse of Conan's face while leaving, and it was clear the woman was unhappy that Hinata had ignored her advice. But she hadn't expected her father to be waiting for her when her uncle escorted her home, and the disapproving look on his face left no doubts that he knew what she'd done. She hadn't seen that look since before she started training with Naruto. "My office," he ordered. "Now." She made her way there, picking up heated whispers between her father and his brother. Now she was sitting in front of her father's desk, waiting for him to return. She didn't dare use her Byakugan to see where he was or if he was coming. She couldn't remember the last time she'd been this nervous because of her father. As a child her skills had been seen as mildly disappointing, but training with the master of the Rinnegan had caused her to improve by leaps and bounds, and her family's disdain was a thing of the past. Until now. The door opened sharply and her father entered. To her surprise, Uncle Hisashi stepped in behind him, pausing to close the door gently before standing against one wall, not obviously supporting either one. Her father sat down behind his desk. "I hear you are pursuing a relationship with Naruto Uzumaki." It was a statement of fact, not a question, but she nodded. There was no sense in denying it, and she went to say she and Naruto were dating. "And that Konan-san advised you against this some time ago." Again, she nodded, feeling her heart hammer even faster. She could, of course, point out that it was just advice and Konan-san hadn't forbidden her from dating Naruto. But even so, it would be thought of as dishonorable. Konan and Nagato had saved her life as a child and she had just repaid that by going against their wishes. So in spite of the suggestion from your saviors, who are also your family and father's friends, you pursued this course of action, heedless of the consequences. That rankled a little, hearing her feelings dismissed as a course of action like it was some kind of strategy. "I love Naruto," she blurted out, unable to stop the words. The room fell quiet. She didn't see what expression Uncle Hisashi had, but her father had gone stone-faced at the words. She felt her face heating up and getting red as she thought of what she'd just admitted, but she didn't back down or deny it. "You are too young to know what love is," her father said. Pretty much what Konan had been saying, just not as tactfully. Off to one side, Uncle Hisashi gave a loud cough that sounded suspiciously like Hisana. Hisashi shot him a quick glare before returning his attention to Hinata. "My daughter, you are too young to be pursuing a relationship. Do not forget that you are the heir apparent to the Hyuga clan. Whoever you choose to marry one day will have a powerful role in the future of the whole clan." "She kissed the boy, she didn't propose to him," Uncle Hisashi interjected dryly. He received another glare, smiling blandly in the face of it. "Hinata," Hisashi began. That got her attention. Her father was usually formal outside of meals with the immediate family. "You are young. I know you are close to Naruto, but none of us know how you two will grow and change. We can't predict what he will become one day." The implications caused her ire to flare up. "If you're forbidding this because of the Kyuubi," she began. She couldn't believe her father would suggest that Naruto would let the beast out one day. "No," he cut her off. "I have met Naruto several times, and never once have I suspected the Kyuubi has any influence on him. I speak of his penchant for tricks and jokes, his chaotic nature, and the simple truth that any shinobi can change beyond recognition. Orochimaru was once a quiet, well-mannered young boy in the academy." Neither Hinata or Hisashi had anything to say to that. Hisashi pressed forward. "Your future is already fraught with peril and strife, Hinata. I can't expect to keep you safe from heartbreak, but I don't want you to suffer it so young." "Naruto would never leave me," she said confidently. "But he might die." The grim words made the following silence ugly. Hisashi let them sink in for a few seconds. "No one, not even I, can hope to come back safely from every mission. And some die terribly young. I will pray for you every time you leave, but you or he may die." The grim silence returned. Even Hisashi didn't break it. It stretched for a long minute. Then Uncle Hisashi stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder and facing his twin brother. "Nagato-san is a very wise ninja," he began. "Wise enough to predict that you would say such a thing, brother." The corners of his lips quirked upward. "And he asked me to pass along this message. Pain and loss are only bearable with the company of our loved ones." He glanced down at Hinata. "I don't know if my niece here truly loves the boy or if she'll find someone else one day. But I know that, 1 year from now, she will begin taking missions as a shinobi and the world will scar and change her. I would be happy to know that she's accompanied by someone who cares for her and will seek both her safety and her happiness." He looked back at his brother. "Naruto has a kind heart and his guardians have nurtured that. I can't see him treating Hinata with disrespect." "I feel the same," Hisashi stepped in smoothly. The boy's attitude was never in question, merely his reputation and their age. "They're old enough to start needing each other. You know what ninja life does to a person, Hisashi. Don't deny her that support. She has her sister, her cousin, and the both of us. She's been training under Nagato and Konan for 4 years. They're also close to her." Konan-san herself agrees that they're too young. While Nagato-san finds it a good idea. The two men stared each other down, leaving Hinata feeling slightly invisible. She didn't seem to have much say in this anymore. "Hinata, go to your room for tonight. I will speak with you in the morning," her father ordered. She left meekly, bowing to her father and giving her uncle a quick grateful smile. She couldn't believe he'd stood up to her father like that just for her sake. She knew the moment she walked into the dining room in the morning. Her father, uncle and cousin were all seated at the table. Father was already eating, eyes fixed on the food, while her uncle gave his trademark tiny smile, his lips quirking upward ever so slightly. Niji greeted her with a nod and a questioning look at the adults. She sat next to her father, facing Niji, and just smiled at him before eating. Hanabi came in a few minutes later and sat on Hinata's other side. Silence reigned at the table, even more than usual. Everyone could sense the tension emanating from Hiashi. At last, Hiashi finished, rising to his feet. "Meet me in my office," he ordered his daughter before leaving. She ate quickly, saying a polite goodbye to her family. 5 minutes later, she was seated before her father. "You are allowed to pursue this relationship with Naruto Uzumaki," he began. "With several conditions." He lifted 3 fingers to count them off. "You are not to stay the night with him. You will have a chaperone on your dates until both of you are 13 years of age. And he will not keep you out past 10 o'clock, nor get you involved when the Hokage must punish him." The first one just made her blush at the thought of staying the night with Naruto, but she understood. She had stayed over several times after intense training sessions, but it was different when it was at her boyfriend's home. The idea of an adult watching them on dates wasn't fun, but maybe Uncle Hisashi could be persuaded. And while she knew Naruto wouldn't hesitate to accept all the guilt for his pranks, she understood the last rule too. Dating the town's notorious prankster Jinchuriki would be tough enough on the clan's image, though Naruto's stellar grades at the academy helped. But if she started getting a bad reputation around the village, it would irreparably tarnish the clan. "You do understand that if you break any one of those rules, even once, you will not be allowed to date him?" Hiashi asked. "Of course," she agreed. "Good." He sighed lightly. "Konan-san has agreed to those conditions." There was obviously no question of Nagato-san accepting. "I expect you to be appropriately respectful to your saviors, given the change in your relationship to them." Right, they weren't only her saviors and teachers now, they were also her potential future in-laws. The thought made her insides quiver, even though she knew that she and Naruto were years away from that. "I would respect them," she promised. Hiashi sighed again. "Then you have my blessing to pursue Naruto." His expression softened just a little, only someone who knew him well would notice the difference. "I wish you happiness, Hinata." She smiled, getting to her feet. "Thank you, father." She left the room, nearly dancing down the halls at the thought of having a real date with Naruto. The summer passed quickly for everyone. Itachi requested a month at home and got shifted to the village watch. He spent the time training Sasuke on techniques such as maneuvering through a city, tracking a target and incapacitating rather than killing, a difficult but valued skill. They both worked on Naruto's voice-changing technique, soon being let in on the secret by Nagato. The most they could achieve in the end was to either make their voice deep and gravelly or thin and high-pitched, and Itachi managed some ventriloquism. Hinata and Naruto began dating, usually accompanied by Hisashi or Konan. It was about what anyone would have predicted between two 11-year-olds. Cute most of the time, with plenty of mistakes on both sides that the adults would tease them mercilessly about. Naruto even did fewer pranks, both because he was spending time with Hinata and because he'd been warned against involving her, and it was both more difficult and less fun without her help. The young couple didn't forget about their shinobi training. Most of their dates took place after training sessions with Nagato and Konan, and both of them were trying harder than ever to impress one another, sending them ahead by leaps and bounds. The basic academy techniques became second nature for them, and all of their combat skills reached the level of an academy graduate. Nagato had started them on advanced exercises designed simply to increase the amount of chakra they could produce and channel by the end of the summer. Nagato himself continued on with Akatsuki. He recruited not only Kakuzu with the promise of collecting bounties on targets, but also a being named Zetsu, who possessed some type of plant-based Kekkei Genkai that allowed him to merge with trees and pass through them. Nagato was curious whether it was connected to the first Hokage's wood element, but Zetsu refused to allow any tests. Nagato was satisfied to have him as a spy for now. Summer ended and the children returned to school, freeing up Nagato to focus on Akatsuki. Only 2 months in, he had to pause for another party. "Why do we have so many parties?" he asked Konan. "It feels like that's all we do sometimes." "Because life is wonderful here," she answered, focusing on the 1,000 origami cranes she was creating simultaneously. "And it's his birthday, he deserves a party." Nagato had to agree, if anyone needed a birthday party, it was Naruto. Only a few friends regularly attended since most were busy with a different tradition. The anniversary of the Kyuubi's attack and the commemoration of the sacrifice of many of their brave shinobi. Naturally, the clans had suffered and many of Naruto's friends went to show their respects and thanks to their family, something even Naruto wouldn't argue with. So Nagato wasn't surprised to see only 3 guests. Hinata, Sasuke, and Shino. The Abiram was a quiet boy, but always polite and respectful, and Nagato admired his rational thinking at such a young age. However, while the children were playing games, the doorbell rang again, causing them all to look up in surprise. "Who else is coming?" Sasuke asked Naruto. The boy still had trouble speaking directly to Nagato and Konan and continued to refuse invitations to train with them. "I don't know," everyone else said they were busy. Of course, Sakura might normally have joined, but she'd been distant ever since Naruto began dating Hinata. Nagato opened the door with a smile, knowing who was on the other side. "Well, here I am expecting a legendary ninja, and I get an old geezer. I'm still young enough to teach you a thing or two, brat," the Toad Sannin replied, trading grins with his old students. "You gonna make me stand out here in the rain all day?" Nagato stepped back, letting his teacher in. "Jiraiya!" Naruto exclaimed, racing up to him and cannonballing into the Sannin, hugging him around the stomach. "Whoa, kid," Jiraiya said, catching his balance and hugging his godson. The last time they'd met, Naruto had been a lot lighter. Now he was approaching real ninja age. "Putting on some weight, aren't you? They'd better make sure it's all muscle, you hear? The ladies don't like tubby guys." "Try saying that to Chauza," Nagato remarked. "And he already has a girlfriend." "Oh ho." Jiraiya eyed the quiet Hyuga girl who was watching them curiously. In 2 seconds he'd sized her up, but he looked for another 5 seconds, both to verify his first observations and to judge how she stood up under scrutiny. He kept a smile from his face as she met his gaze solidly, holding herself proudly. "Good choice, kid," he ruffled Naruto's hair playfully, looking down at him. "Good to see you again, sensei," Konan greeted him with a quick hug. "You too, you little angel." It was an old nickname, with a bit of irony. The tactics she'd mastered under his tutelage were anything but angelic, despite her beauty and sweet disposition. There were some quick introductions for the other children, who were all a little awed to meet one of the Sannin, but ultimately took it well. After all, the Rinnegan was something out of the oldest myths to exist, said to belong to the god of shinobi, and they'd been seeing it on a regular basis for 6 years. "I think it's time to open presents," Nagato declared. His friends went first, of course. Sasuke had given him a set of pristine new kunai and shuriken, forged personally by Tetsuo Uchiha and with a guaranteed sharpness. Shino bought him a bingo book and a set of pince-nez, with dark lenses in a style that was both fashionable and mildly intimidating. Naruto quickly tried them on and admired himself in the mirror. Last was Hinata's, which at first looked like just a metal bowl, leading him to frown in confusion. Hinata hurried to explain. It's a ramen bowl, Naruto-kun. The seals on the inside are designed to hold up to a week's worth of ramen, so you can have it during long missions, and it also has a pair of chopsticks sealed in the side. There followed a slightly surprised silence, then Naruto's face broke into a wide grin. "That's awesome, Hinata-chan. Thanks." He hugged the girl, causing her face to go red, though she smiled happily. "What about you?" Naruto looked up at the 3 adults. They all shared grins with each other. "Each of us will be teaching you a new technique," Nagato said. "Something fit for an active shinobi. And Jiraiya will be staying in town for several months to help with your training." Naruto's grin lit up the whole room. "It's called Rasengan," Nagato explained, holding out the spinning orb of chakra for Naruto to examine. It gave off a faint keening noise as the boy looked at it curiously. "What does it do?" An answer, Nagato turned and thrust the sphere at a nearby tree. The technique bored through the wood with ease, leaving behind a perfect circular hole. "That is the result if you keep the technique maintained," he told Naruto. "This is what happens if you allow it to be disrupted partway through." He hit another tree, waiting until it began carving into the trunk before letting the densely concentrated chakra escape its containment, bursting out in every direction. The tree promptly exploded from the force, chips of wood raining down on the grass up to 40 feet away. "That's awesome," Naruto exclaimed. "Teach me how to do it." "That's why we're here. First, a few things you should know. The Rasengan was a secret technique created by the 4th Hokage. He taught it to his best student and to his sensei, Jiraiya, who taught it to me. This will make you only the 5th person to learn the technique and one of 4 still alive. You are not to teach it to others without first clearing it with both myself and Jiraiya, is that understood?" Naruto nodded seriously. "Good. Secondly, it's a highly chakra-intensive technique. Even for a Jinchuriki, it will be exhausting at your age. If you do manage to master it before graduation, I can guarantee your chakra reserves will be equal to most jonin. That's a good starting point to realize your full potential. Lastly, this technique also demands great chakra control." So does the technique Konan will teach you, which is why you'll be learning both of them at the same time to improve your chakra control in different ways. Jiraiya's technique only requires large reserves, so you'll learn that last, as a reward. Okay, I get it, top secret, super hard. Now how do I do it? Nagato sighed inwardly. First, we use water balloons, he said, picking one out of the bag in his hand. The first step is rotation. He performed the hand signs again, finishing by clasping his hands together in a snake seal and concentrating. The sheets of paper lifted off the ground, gathering at his back, but as soon as they started extending outward, they quickly fell away from one another, fluttering to the ground for a second before being pulled back by his chakra. It happened several times before Konan told him to stop. Maintaining the proper concentration of chakra at a distance from your body is a tricky thing to grasp, she said. I spent 2 years creating this technique and being able to use it. I can't spend 2 years on this. Naruto exclaimed. She calmed him with a smile. It won't take that long, I had to make it from scratch, you're learning from me. It's just going to take more chakra control. But I can use chakra at a distance, he pointed out. Yes, I know, she said deadpan, recalling his lessons with triggering explosive tags. But that's just a singular burst of chakra at one point. With this, you're maintaining a stream of chakra over several feet and pumping more power into the technique will cause it to fail. There's no shortcut here, you'll just have to focus on your chakra and learn through experience how it feels as you create the wings. She smiled encouragingly. You'll get there. And the sooner you start, the sooner you'll succeed. Iruka smiled as the class left, heading home to start winter break. Naruto had been unusually well behaved this year. He'd gotten the impression that he was putting a lot of time and energy into his private training with his aunt and uncle. Closing and locking the school doors, he turned to head home. Halfway there, he realized he was tense, half expecting one of Naruto's pranks to pop up out of nowhere. Forcing himself to relax, he made it home. The door didn't open when he turned the handle. Instead, a sheet of paper fluttered down from above. Catching it, he saw unrecognizable block handwriting. Iruka-sensei, let's hope you're a match for everything you taught us. Iruka heaved a sigh. It seemed that Naruto had taken personally the practical lesson and obstacle course on traps. His apartment was likely more full of tripwires and pranks than an ambu safe house. At least he knew Naruto's final semester would start with detentions. Grinning madly, Naruto drove a completed Rasengan into a boulder, carving out a tunnel until he was elbow deep in it. Then he let go of the Rasengan's containment, detonating the chakra weapon and sending hot chunks of stone flying across the training ground. Well done, Naruto, Nagato congratulated him, smiling proudly. Anything else? Konan asked. Flashing through a set of hand seals, Naruto first unsealed a mass of paper from one of his scrolls, then gathered it with his chakra. It was a little slow, but within a minute he had formed a set of wings with an 8-foot wingspan. With some careful flaps, he lifted off the ground, hovering just above eye level with his guardians. Konan hugged him. Excellent. She exclaimed. Now we'll have to get Jiraiya back, Nagato said. Just 1 week too slow, Hifo sighed, leading Naruto to wince. Jiraiya had left Konoha a week ago, having taught Naruto the basics of intelligence gathering and people watching. It was pretty much the only area of espionage work that Naruto had lacked real training in, to Jiraiya's delight. Expecting it to be another couple of months before Naruto learned the Rasengan and Angel Wings techniques, Jiraiya had gone back to traveling and spying. Alright, you'll want to stand back, Jiraiya said. Nagato and Konan dutifully gave him and Naruto some more space. Unlocking the seal will release a rush of chakra from the Kyuubi. I expect it'll be painful. As he spoke, he placed one hand over a seal contained in the Toad Scroll and the other hand over Naruto's exposed seal. Both seals lit up with blue flames and Naruto abruptly doubled over, stumbling back with his hands over his stomach. Is something wrong? Konan asked nervously. There's a large amount of red chakra entering his system, Nagato informed her, peering closely at their nephew. Which was the plan? Konan stifled a gasp as the red chakra suddenly became visible to her, streams of it bursting out of Naruto and flailing around him. Naruto? You doing okay? Jiraiya called. The strangled reached the 3 adults, who exchanged worried looks. You can reseal it, right? Once I lay a hand on the seal, Jiraiya confirmed. Let's wait until it's finished. These are untested waters, let's see it through. The red chakra didn't die down, but it settled a little, the thick energy wrapping around Naruto and coating his body in a red nimbus. He pushed himself to his feet, turning to the adults. All 3 managed not to flinch. His bright blue eyes had turned blood red, the pupils turning to thin slits. The nearly invisible whisker marks on his cheeks had thickened and darkened, covering his face. His teeth had elongated and sharpened. And his stance was still hunched over, lacking the precision his ninja training had given him and replacing it with something feral and untamed. How are you feeling? Konan asked, taking a step forward. Sore, Naruto growled, his voice deeper than before, approaching an adult's. All over. But strong. I wanna do something, he nearly ed, and now they noticed the mild shaking, as if just standing still was an effort for the boy. Why not? You signed the contract, now you've got the chakra to really use it. You need a small blood offering, Jiraiya reminded him. Naruto raised his hands, glancing at the sharp claws that his fingernails had become, then used one to slice open his palm, fresh blood welling up and spilling over his fingers for just 2 seconds before the cut closed up. He flashed through hand seals and slapped the bloody hand down on the ground, sending out a surge of chakra that sent goosebumps down their spines. The blast of smoke obscured half the training ground for a moment, then cleared rapidly, revealing a massive toad with Naruto atop his head. Amabunta? Jiraiya asked incredulously. He summoned you on the first try. Ow. The toad boss grunted, rolling his eyes up to look at the boy. Tone it down with that chakra. It burns. Sorry. Naruto said, jumping down to land in front of Jiraiya. The red aura had dimmed significantly, and the whiskers were visibly thinner. I'm practicing with it. Well, take it easy. And next time, don't summon me without permission, brat. Would someone like you get to sign the contract? The last question was directed at Naruto, but Gamabunta was looking at Jiraiya. He's the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. He's the only remaining part of Minato's legacy, Jiraiya said solemnly. Don't be so sentimental, Jiraiya. The whole village of Konoha is Minato's legacy. He eyed Naruto for a few seconds. The boy met his gaze evenly, refusing to back down. But I admit, he's got spunk. Listen up, brat. I'm the Toad Boss, Gamabunta-sama, leader of the Toads of Mount Myaboku. Until you exchange say cups with me, you're not under my protection, so don't summon me without a darn good reason. I'm only 12. I can't drink yet. Naruto exclaimed. Good, you won't be bothering me for a few years. As Naruto argued with the giant toad, Jiraiya winked conspiratorially at Nagato and Konan. They'll get along famously, trust me. The three of them settled in to watch as Gamabunta stonewalled Naruto's pleas for leniency, until at last the toad disappeared in another blast of smoke, leaving Naruto pouting at the spot where he'd been. Alright, since we're already here, you should start practicing with that chakra, Nagato said, drawing a short sword as he walked toward Naruto. Konan began circling, summoning paper that swirled around her, folding into various weapons. Grinning happily, Naruto launched himself at his uncle, drawing out more of the red chakra and throwing a devastating punch. Nagato deflected it with ease, and they were soon sparring in earnest. Naruto's greater speed and strength were valuable, and they quickly learned that minor injuries healed in seconds. Jiraiya joined in at that point, and even with the adults going easy, Naruto was put on the defensive. It seemed his emotions were less in control, however, as his irritation at not being able to attack was clearly visible. Dodging a swarm of paper shuriken made of explosive notes, his lips curled back into a snarl. Jiraiya tagged him with a fireball, and as he escaped the flames, Nagato's foot connected squarely with his solar plexus, sending him tumbling across the training field until he collided with a boulder. As he sprang to his feet with a roar of pain and rage, the adults winced to hear his broken collarbone and shoulder snap and pop itself back into shape. A moment later he was racing in their direction on all fours, red chakra gushing out of him like a raging river. He's losing control, Jiraiya said. We'll have to shut him down. I'll capture high, watch out. Konan screamed. The other two barely reacted in time to the blazing red Rasengan Naruto had formed on the fly and thrust in their direction. Naruto is not allowed to release the Kyuubi's chakra unless the lives of his comrades are in jeopardy, Jiraiya stated. That's rather harsh, don't you think? Sarutobi inquired, wondering what had driven his student to such an extreme. Yeah, I do, Jiraiya said, stretching a little and wincing. It was Naruto's idea. He doesn't want to risk it happening again, he says. The kid doesn't even care if it's his own life that's in danger, that's how hard he's taking it. Sarutobi took a pull from his pipe as he considered the matter. And you have assured him he's overreacting? The Sannin snorted. I could say it till I'm blue in the face, old man, he's not listening. He'll come around one day, or maybe this'll turn out to be a good thing. Kushina never used its chakra, remember? Her seal was quite different. But yes, she always fought with her own strength. Look at the result. Jiraiya shrugged. You want to talk to him, go right ahead. I don't think you'll have much luck, though. He's already made up his mind. The rest of the class year passed by without incident if you didn't count Naruto's attempt to misdirect an Anbu training session by giving out orders in the Hokage's voice while remaining hidden. That had quickly devolved into a furious village-wide day-long search for Naruto by the Anbu. It ended when Nagato showed up, locating his ward in moments and dragging him home for dinner. Of everyone, Hiashi Hyuga had been the most aggrieved, his temper only slightly checked by his brother, pointing out that Naruto's skill had been put on public display by evading Anbu for a full day. In the end, Naruto restrained himself to harmless tricks and pranks against his classmates, while staying largely out of public eye. Quite the feat for a publicly acknowledged Jinchuriki being raised by the only possessor of the Rinnegan to appear in 2000 years. At last, the time came that his childhood reached an end. At the end of his final year in the academy, he graduated at the top of his class, his closest friends coming in with grades just less than his own. This sucks. Naruto ed, nearly stomping down the street to the academy. Naruto, it's not the end of the world, Sasuke said. The only thing keeping him from rolling his eyes was that he'd already done it a dozen times this morning. Naruto just wouldn't shut up. But the top of the class always gets teamed up with the lowest. That means I have to be with Shikamaru. Well, you'll have two teammates, Hinata tried comforting him, patting him on the shoulder. So you might get someone you'd prefer to work with, right? Yeah, but Shikamaru's so boring. He won't help with pranks, he doesn't ever want to practice techniques, all he does is stare at clouds all day. Maybe he'll improve when you become his teammate, Hinata said optimistically. Naruto just heaved a massive sigh of exasperation, amplified by his voice transformation, so that everyone looked in their direction as they entered the school courtyard. Seeing only Naruto, they dismissed it as not their problem and turned away. Their class gathered for the final time, most of them chatting excitedly as they wondered who they'd be teamed up with for their shinobi career. Naruto just put his head down on his desk, ignoring everyone. Hinata and Sasuke sat on either side, exchanging looks that quite clearly said we won't even try to talk to him right now. For all that they both loved their friend, they hated when he was a drama queen. Everyone's attention was grabbed by Iruka's entrance. The teacher strode to the front of the room, holding a clipboard. First of all, I'm very proud of every one of you for passing your exams and becoming official shinobi. I wish you all luck in your future careers. Having said so, he looked at the clipboard and began reading off the lists of teams. As he made his way down the list, his mind returned to a meeting he'd had the day before. In Iruka's opinion, entering the Hokage's office to find himself facing not only the Hokage, but Nagato of the Rinnegan and the heads of the Hyuga, Inuzuka, Nara, Yamanaka, Akimichi, and Aburame clans was not a good thing. The first words out of the Hokage's mouth confirmed it. As you know, Iruka, the clan heads have a very reasonable interest in who their heirs are placed on teams with. And this year has an unusually large number of clan heirs graduating. We can't have our children's progress being slowed down more than necessary, Hiashi Hyuga stated boldly. And of course, we have our own traditions to uphold, Shikaku Nara said dryly. In order to honor our ancestors. Iruka had been prepared for some of this, and it only took him a couple seconds of quick thought to guess what was coming. So I expect you want for Shikamaru, Ino, and Choji to be on one team. There were nods from the parents of those three. And Naruto would work best with his closest friends, specifically Sasuke and Hinata. He directed his question at Nagato, who nodded at the same time as Hiashi. Then that would leave Kiba and Shino to be teamed with their female classmate with the highest grades, namely Sakura Haruno. Is that acceptable? Tsume didn't try to hide her surprise, but nodded. Shibi just gave a curt nod. If you insist, I can make it work. Your understanding is greatly appreciated, Iruka, the Hokage said. The teacher gave no response as he walked out. He didn't like having his class interfered with, even if he could appreciate how powerful the proposed teams would become. Team 7, he reached the important part of the list, having placed all the lower-ranked students in teams. Will consist of Naruto Uzumaki, the blonde boy's head popped up, trepidation and a touch of hope in his blue eyes. Sasuke Uchiha, Naruto shared a quick grin with his friend. And Hinata Hyuga. An exuberant cheer burst from the boy as he grabbed his closest friends in something between a hug and a headlock, dragging them out of their chairs and ignoring their protests. Iruka waited for his exhilarated student to calm down and his new teammates to slip out of his hold and get back to their seats. And the three of you shall be led by Itachi Uchiha. Sasuke sat up straighter, surprise showing in his eyes, even though his face remained impassive. Naruto and Hinata both smiled, having met Sasuke's brother in passing before. Iruka suspected they'd be in for a rude awakening when they met the young man in a professional environment. Team 8, he moved on. Will consist of Kiba Inuzuka, Shino Aburame, and Sakura Haruno, and will be led by Kurina Yuhi. Those three took the assignment rather well. Sakura had looked crestfallen when it was announced that Hinata was on Naruto's team, but she managed to smile at her new teammates. They had all been friends for so long that they would work together well. Team 9 is still on rotation from last year. Team 10 will consist of Ino Yamanaka, Shikamaru Nara and Choji Akimichi, and will be led by Asuma Sarutobi. There was no surprise this time, and not just because it was the last team to be announced. The three of them had certainly grown up hearing about the Ino Shikacho trio. Ino and Choji smiled at each other, while Shikamaru nodded lazily before staring out the window to watch the clouds. You'll meet your new senseis here in 2 hours, so be back before then. Once again, I wish you all luck. Their usual large group ate lunch together, Shino commenting on the odds against the team formations that had been announced. Sasuke listened for about 5 seconds before coming to the obvious conclusion. They must have ignored tradition to optimize the teams. Come on, there are 3 of us that earned clan heirs, and one of them is a Jinchuriki. Our teams weren't made coincidentally. He's right, Sakura agreed. I looked up a bunch of information on old academy classes at the library. Normally they make balanced teams by putting top-ranked students with low-ranked ones, but whenever clans are involved, especially heirs, that goes out the window. What are you talking about? Ino asked. I'm still paired up with a low ranker. She elbowed Shikamaru, who just rolled his eyes as everyone laughed. The rest of the lunch break passed quickly as they talked about what their new senseis might be like. Sasuke talked about his brother, but it quickly became clear that Itachi was frequently away on missions and kept to himself in any case. The Ino Shikacho trio's teacher had the Hokage's last name, so they all felt that he would be a powerful teacher. Teammate's teacher was a total mystery, on the other hand. When they returned to the classroom, 15 minutes before the 2-hour deadline, they found several adults waiting there. A bearded man with a tactical vest and a sash bearing the symbol of fire looked up at their entrance. Team 10. They nodded warily. I'm Asuma Sarutobi. Come with me. They waved goodbye to their friends as they left. Only a minute passed before another person entered. Clad in black, form-fitting clothes, with customized Anbu armor that was heavier on the left arm, and wearing a Konoha headband at an angle so the plate faced off to the side, Itachi Uchiha strode into the room. His cool, gray eyes danced over all the students rapidly before focusing on a particular 3. Team 7, he addressed them. Follow me. Saying goodbye to Team 8, they followed their new sensei to the top of the building. Once there, he leaned against a railing, gesturing to a nearby bench. He waited until they were seated before speaking. As you know, I am Itachi Uchiha, your Jonin instructor. I expect you all know that I am also a former Anbu captain, meaning I have some quite advanced techniques to teach you. Before we go further, we should introduce ourselves and share some details. They already know all of each other's details, Sasuke smirked at his friends. Hinata blushed and stammered while Naruto just rolled his eyes, chuckling. Can you go first, sensei? Naruto asked. Itachi nodded. I am Itachi Uchiha, I like Paki and learning new fire techniques, I dislike those who are arrogant and overestimate their skills. My hobby is reading, and my dream is to restore the reputation of the Uchiha clan. He pointed at Naruto, who took the cue at once. I'm Naruto Uzumaki. I like learning new jutsus, eating ramen, and hanging out with Hinata-chan. He shared a smile with his girlfriend. I dislike people who judge others right away. My hobbies are reading the bingo book and eating ramen, and my dream is to be the greatest Hokage ever. Itachi raised an eyebrow. The greatest? Why not just the next Hokage? If I'm the best, then it'll prove I really am the hero the 4th Hokage wanted me to be. If I can protect everyone even better than he can, maybe they'll stop thinking of me as the Kyuubi. Their sensei nodded thoughtfully before pointing to Hinata. I am Hinata Hyuga. I like spending time with Naruto-kun and his aunt Konan and playing with animals. I dislike people that are hateful to those I care about. My dream is to earn my father's respect and to marry Naruto-kun one day. Sasuke laughed at his friend's shocked and nervous expression, and even Itachi had to suppress a grin. The Uchiha went next without waiting for a prompt. I'm Sasuke Uchiha. I like training with my brother, tomatoes, and green tea. I dislike sweets, traitors, and people who call me a traitor. My hobby is practicing techniques, and my dream is to restore the Uchiha clan's reputation. Naruto and Hinata shared a look. The brothers' similarities were almost frightening. Now that we've done that, we can get down to business. Tomorrow, we have our first team exercise. What'll it be? Naruto asked. Combat simulation. He paused for a moment, looking each one in the eye. Against me. You'll get the details tomorrow morning, training ground 7 at 8 am, and you should skip breakfast. Otherwise you'll throw up everywhere once we get started. Without waiting for a response, he made a hand sign and disappeared, replaced by a swirl of leaves and wind. There was a long silence as his 3 students stared at the spot where he'd been. Okay, he's kinda scary, Naruto said. Neither one said anything. Sasuke was trying to gauge just how much of what his brother said was true and how much was intimidation or trickery. Hinata was thinking of how much both Naruto and Itachi could be drama queens and desperately attempting not to picture an older Naruto in Anbu gear with an air of power and authority. Her imagination was quickly beating her self-discipline as her face started getting redder. Any suggestions? Naruto asked Sasuke. Without knowing what we're up against. Sasuke shrugged. We can at least know what his specialties are, Hinata pointed out. Sasuke raised an eyebrow. Well, he's great with fire techniques, good with a sword, he's a stealth master who's carried out both reconnaissance and assassination in foreign countries without a scratch, an expert martial artist, he can predict all our moves with the Sharingan, see through genjutsus, cast his own with nothing but eye contact. And has copied techniques from who knows how many other ninjas. Naruto and Hinata just stared at him for a minute in shock. He's an Anbu captain, remember? I don't think he actually has a weakness. Come on, he's gotta have something. A weakness that 3 academy students can exploit. The 3 best academy students. Including his brother. Sasuke sighed. Look, if you want my advice, we should just go eat a big dinner, go to sleep early, and meet him in the morning. You mean follow the rules? Naruto complained. Shocking, I know. A revolutionary idea for you, Sasuke said dryly. This test won't be to see if we can beat him or anything, it's just gonna be to see where we stand. That makes sense, Hinata said, nodding. He's got to learn our own strengths and weaknesses in order to teach us properly. Oh, okay, Naruto said. So we'll just have to do our best to impress him, then. Easy. Sasuke nodded. Okay, then I'll see you tomorrow. 8 a.m. the next morning found the 3 of them waiting at training ground 7. Naruto was absent-mindedly tossing kunai between his fingers, juggling them to see how many he could control at once. Hinata was meditating. Sasuke was practicing his control of fire chakra by keeping a candle-sized flame burning in the palm of his hand with pure chakra control. At exactly 8 o'clock, Itachi's voice came from directly behind them. Good morning, students. They jumped, Naruto's knife slipping through his fingers, Sasuke's fire going out, and Hinata's meditative calm shattered. Where did you come from? Naruto exclaimed, spinning around to stare at his sensei. I've been here for the past minute, Naruto. Stealth techniques can be highly effective. Smiling slightly at the 3 of them, he took a backpack off his shoulder and set it on the tree stump Hinata had been resting against. Now, the rules of today's test are simple. I will create 3 shadow clones. For those who do not know, a shadow clone behaves exactly like the original, and all its memories will return to the original upon the clone's destruction. The clone is easily dispersed by a single blow. Also, the caster's chakra is split evenly among all of their shadow clones, meaning each of these, here he paused to form a hand sign they'd never seen before, causing 3 clones to pop into existence. Have 1/4 of my total chakra. So we have to defeat all 3 of them? Naruto asked, eyeing the clones. 3 on 3. No, Itachi replied, surprising his 3 students. 3 one-on-one fights, at different locations. Wait, we're fighting alone? Sasuke asked, alarmed. All the plans he'd had for fighting his brother involved cooperating with his teammates. Alone, not one of them would stand a chance against Itachi. It only takes a single hit to defeat them, Itachi reminded them. Also, each of you who defeats your opponent will receive one of these. Here, he reached into the bag and removed 3 box lunches. Their stomachs growled openly at the reminder that they hadn't eaten yet, and they all glared at Itachi as they realized why he told them to skip breakfast. On top of that, he fixed them all with his cool gray stare. Those of you who fail will be sent back to the academy. This is a test with a 66% failure rate, designed to weed out the least talented graduates. What? Naruto, Sasuke, and even Hinata shrieked. Back to the academy? Sasuke repeated. How come we never heard of this? Naruto exploded. Because it's a secret, Itachi answered. Every team has a test like this. You will have friends alongside you if you fail. What? But that's Hinata couldn't seem to find the right words. No sense in wasting time, Itachi said, pulling a clock out of the bag. Setting it and then placing it on top of the boxed lunches, he nodded to the clones. They each beckoned to a different student before walking away in separate directions. You have 3 hours. I hope to see all 3 of you pass. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow Hope Angelina for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.